So imagine watching someone just hand over their credit card for a completely unremarkable photograph of a pig.
Like just a regular pig.
Yeah, literally not a famous pig, just this regular sandy-nosed pig dog paddling in the ocean.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. And to you, it looks like this cheap novelty print, maybe worth the paper it's printed on.
Yeah, I mean, why would anyone buy that?
Exactly. So why did this person just pay the premium price for it without even batting an eye? Well, it's because they weren't actually buying the ink or the paper. They were buying the invisible multiplier attached to it.
I love this example because we constantly assume value is objective. We think it lives in the physical materials or the raw code of a software program or the hours of labor put into a consulting project.
It doesn't, right?
No, not at all. Value is entirely subjective. It is largely driven by the context surrounding the object.
And that context is exactly what we are dissecting today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So we are exploring the introduction and the first chapter of a really fascinating book called Sell with a Story by Paul Smith.
It's such a great read.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to basically isolate the exact mechanism that causes buyers to drop their defenses, reevaluate what they're looking at, and ultimately, open their wallets.
Yeah, and we are going to unpack what a sales story actually is. I mean, we really need to distinguish a genuine persuasive narrative from all that empty corporate jargon that usually masquerades as one.
Right, the corporate speak.
Exactly. So you're going to learn how to master 6 specific structural attributes that make a story actually work. This is critical for anyone in business or entrepreneurship.
Because storytelling isn't just magic, right?
Right. It is not some innate magical gift. It's a learnable mechanical skill that dramatically increases the perceived value of whatever product or service you happen to be selling.
Totally. So to understand how this works in practice, we have to look at how the author, Paul Smith, experienced this phenomenon firsthand.
Yeah, the art fair story.
Yes. He sets this scene in the introduction of the book. It's May, and he's at this juried art fair at Coney Island in Cincinnati, Ohio. He's walking around with his wife, Lisa.
And the dynamic between them is really crucial here.
It really is. Lisa is an artist. She has this highly sophisticated appreciation for fine art. So she can spend hours drifting from booth to booth, analyzing brushstrokes, dissecting the artist's inspiration, all the mediums they chose.
Right. She is engaging with the art on a very deep analytical level.
Exactly. While the author freely admits he's basically just there to look at the pictures.
He's just tagging along.
Yeah, he's bored, he's dragging his feet through the summer heat, and eventually they end up at the booth of a photographer named Chris Gugg.
Now, Gugg is apparently famous for these breathtaking, majestic underwater shots of marine life, right?
Right. Coral reefs, sea turtles, giant whales, just beautiful stuff. But Lisa spots a picture that seems completely out of place among all this oceanic majesty. It is a photograph of a pig.
Literally just a farm pig sitting in the salt water.
Just a little baby piglet, up to its nostrils in the salt water. Its snout is covered in sand, and it's dog paddling directly toward the camera lens.
So weird.
Right. Lisa looks at it and thinks it is inspired genius, but the author looks at it and thinks it is just a weird, out-of-place picture of a pig in the ocean. To him, it's a worthless novelty.
He is absolutely not buying this.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
But then the photographer, Chris Gugg, steps in and explains what that pig is actually doing there.
And this right here is the moment the context shifting mechanism kicks in.
Yeah. So Gugg tells them that this photo was taken in the Caribbean, off the beach of an uninhabited Bahamian island called Big Major Cay.
Okay.
Years ago, a local entrepreneur brought a drove of pigs to this island to raise them for bacon. But the entrepreneur failed to plan ahead. There was almost nothing to eat on the island except cactus.
And pigs do not eat cactus.
No, they do not. They were starving.
So it was a completely doomed agricultural venture.
Doomed. Until a restaurant owner on a nearby island started bringing his kitchen refuse over by boat and dumping it a few dozen yards offshore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the starving pigs figured this out, and out of sheer desperation, they learned to swim to get to the food. Generations of pigs followed suit. Now, every pig on the island knows how to swim.
That is incredible.
Right. The island is literally known as Pig Island, and the pigs have learned that any approaching boat means food. So whenever a boat arrives, they eagerly swim right up to it.
Which is how he got the shot.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is how Chris Goode was able to get a close-up shot of a cute, sandy-nosed dog-paddling piglet.
So let's freeze on the immediate cognitive shift that occurs within the author right there.
Yeah, let's break that down.
The physical object, the photograph itself, did not change at all. The ink, the paper, the frame, they're all exactly the same as they were 2 minutes ago.
Right.
But the author's perception of its value transformed instantly.
He literally handed over his credit card and bought it right then and there.
Which is crazy.
2 minutes prior, it was a worthless piece of paper to him. Now it was a conversation piece.
Exactly.
How?
Because the story didn't just add a fun fact, it fundamentally altered the asset itself. It turned a flat picture into a unique combination of geography, history, and animal psychology.
It gave it depth.
Right. And in any sales environment, human beings are constantly asking themselves a subconscious question. They're asking, why is this here? Raw facts, or in this case, the raw visual of a swimming pig, just cannot answer that question effectively. The story acts as the bridge. It answers the why.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to push back here for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Because it's easy to assume this only works on art buyers, right? Or consumers at a summer fair. If I'm a listener sitting in a corporate office right now selling enterprise software or supply chain consulting, I'm dealing with cynical, hardcore B2B buyers.
Right, the real sharks.
Yeah, my buyers aren't looking for cute anecdotes about farm animals. They want ROI. They want efficiency metrics. Are you telling me a story is going to bypass the spreadsheet of a procurement officer?
That is the standard pushback from almost every B2B sales professional. And honestly, it is exactly why so many of them struggle to close deals.
Really?
Yeah. They assume that because the product is technical or the transaction is strictly business, the human brain evaluating the transaction somehow stops being human.
Oh, that makes sense.
But cognitive science and the rigorous research in this book proves otherwise. Whether you are buying a photograph of a pig or a multi-million-dollar logistics contract, a story answers the why and provides context.
It makes the abstract concrete.
Exactly. If you just list the technical features of your software, it's just raw data hitting the prefrontal cortex. It requires immense cognitive load to process and care about.
So it's literally tiring for the brain to look at a spreadsheet.
It is. But if you tell the Pig Island narrative behind it, the specific painful problem that birthed your software, the specific disaster it averted for another client last month, you suddenly give the buyer a narrative they can visualize.
And more importantly, repeat.
Yes. You exponentially increase its perceived value because you've attached meaning to those metrics.
So if I'm preparing for a pitch, before I walk into that meeting and just pull up the slide decks listing the features and benefits, I need to stop. I need to find the Pig Island narrative behind what I'm selling.
Precisely.
I need to give the buyer a story they can actually carry down the hall and repeat to their boss when they ask why they want to spend $100,000 on my software.
Because stories act as a multiplier for interest, and that directly translates into a multiplier for willingness to pay.
Now, the methodology the author uses to prove this is what makes this book so structurally sound, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Paul Smith didn't just come up with this theory while staring at a photograph at a fair and decide to write a book about it. He conducted over 250 in-depth one-on-one interviews.
And he targeted sales professionals from a highly diverse set of 50 organizations. We're talking major players here.
Like
Hewlett-Packard, Costco, Microsoft, Abercrombie & Fitch, Xerox. He looked across all industries, from retail to tech to luxury goods. He wanted to ensure the data wasn't skewed by one specific type of buyer.
But he didn't just interview the salespeople. This is the detail that completely changes the validity of the research for me.
Right, the procurement managers.
Yes. He explicitly went out of his way to interview procurement managers, professional buyers. These are the people whose entire job, 40 hours a week, is to sit across a desk, listen to sales pitches, and decide whether to release corporate funds.
Think about the psychology of a procurement manager for a second. They hear thousands of pitches a year.
Thousands.
Their filters for corporate jargon and manipulation are highly evolved. They have developed mental calluses to standard sales tactics.
It's brilliant, really. If you want to know how to catch fish, you don't just sit around asking the fishermen what they think works.
You study exactly what the fish actually bite on.
Exactly. Yeah. But if that's the case, why do salespeople so rarely do this? Why do they build their entire strategy without consulting the target?
Well, salespeople, And honestly, entire corporate sales departments get trapped in their own echo chambers.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, they sit in conference rooms with their managers and their marketing teams practicing their pitches on each other, but everyone in that room already believes in the product.
They speak the same internal language.
Right, they share the same assumptions. But procurement managers exist entirely outside that bubble. They are the ultimate arbiters of truth in the sales process.
They know when they're being sold to.
Oh, they know exactly what sounds like a manufactured pitch and what sounds like a genuine, compelling narrative that actually makes them lean forward in their chair.
So by studying the procurement managers, the author was able to isolate the exact stories that actually worked to open wallets versus the ones that just made the buyers mentally check out and look at their watches.
Exactly. The procurement managers were asked to recall the best and worst sales stories they ever heard, what made them effective or ineffective, and what makes a pitch sound like a pitch.
And the insights derived from those questions form the backbone of the structural attributes we are going to discuss later.
They do.
So the immediate takeaway here for you listening is to step outside your bubble. Don't just practice your stories on your sales manager or your colleagues who already drink the company Kool-Aid.
Test them on your actual buyers.
Right, or find someone who purchases things for a living. Ask them, does this genuinely engage you, or does it just sound like I'm reading from a corporate script?
You have to calibrate your stories against the people who actually make the buying decisions, not the people who wrote the marketing brochure.
Even with that methodology, I know what some listeners are thinking.
What's that?
They're thinking, okay, storytelling is valuable, the data backs it up, but I'm a financial analyst, or I'm a software engineer. I'm a straightforward numbers person. I am simply not a natural storyteller.
Right, I don't have that magnetic personality excuse.
Exactly. The source material explicitly tackles this fear. It completely debunks the myth that storytelling is some innate genetic trait that you are either born with or lack forever.
That is a very common and very limiting belief. People
Yeah.
treat storytelling as if it's eye color or height. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah, they look at charismatic public speakers and think it's magic.
But storytelling is not magic. It is a mechanical skill.
The text uses an analogy that makes perfect sense of this playing the guitar. Are there natural-born musical prodigies? Sure. Jimi Hendrix existed.
Right.
But if an average, everyday person decides they want to learn the guitar and they take lessons for a few months and they mechanically practice the chords, they can learn to play a few songs perfectly well.
They can entertain a room.
Exactly. Storytelling is the exact same thing.
It is a professional skill, no different from learning advanced Excel functions or mastering a new coding language.
I love the Excel comparison.
Right. Think about how you learned Excel. You didn't just stare at a spreadsheet waiting for inspiration.
You learn the formulas.
You learned the structure. Storytelling requires investing time to understand the underlying structure of a narrative and then putting in the reps to practice it.
The author actually makes a point to say that this book is designed to be a workbook.
Yes, it is not meant to be a passive read. It requires you to actively map out your narratives, draft them, test them, and refine them.
You can use templates. You can use checklists. You can literally build a story the same way you build a logical argument or a financial model. You just have to stop waiting for a muse to strike you with inspiration.
But to build those templates, we have to address a massive problem in the modern business world.
This is my favorite part.
Because corporations have realized that storytelling is powerful, they have completely ruined the definition of the word.
The corporate bastardization of the word story.
Yes.
The text sets this scene perfectly, and I guarantee every single person listening has lived through a version of this. Picture it. It's Monday morning, 9:02 a.m.
Oh, I know where this is going.
The sales team is gathered in the conference room. They have a massive pitch with a new prospect in 3 days. The sales VP walks in, claps her hands, leans on the table, and says, "Okay, people, what's our story?"
And what she is asking for has absolutely nothing to do with a narrative.
Not even remotely.
No.
She is not asking for a protagonist, a setting, and a plot. She is asking for a message track.
She wants talking points.
She wants a 40-slide PowerPoint deck with a logical series of facts, market differentiators, and pricing tiers. 10 years ago, they would have just called it the pitch.
Now they call it the story.
Exactly. We call our strategy document a story. We call the brand logo a story. We call our co-marketing programs stories.
Look, if using the word story for all those corporate artifacts helps people find meaning in their work, that's fine for internal morale.
Sure.
But functionally, it is disastrous for communication.
Because calling a bulleted list of product features a story is like calling a grocery list a poem.
That is the perfect way to look at it. Let's actually linger on that grocery list analogy for a second. Why doesn't a grocery list move us emotionally?
Well, because it's just disconnected items,
Yeah.
right? Milk, eggs, bread. Yes, the words have meaning. I understand what milk is, but there's no journey. There's no conflict,
Exactly. When you dilute the definition of a story to mean any meaningful series of words, you strip the tool of its psychological power.
which is huge.
It is. This is about the psychology of broken expectations. When you tell a buyer, let me tell you the story of our company, their brain prepares for a narrative.
Their defenses go down.
Yes. When a human hears a true story, their mental defenses drop. They stop evaluating claims, they stop looking for flaws in the logic, and they start visualizing scenes. They engage with empathy.
But if you promise them a story and then deliver a grocery list of core competencies,
Their brain recognizes the bait and switch. Their defenses stay up, they feel misled, and you lose their trust before you even get to the pricing page.
if everything is a story, nothing is. So we really need to audit our own vocabulary. If your company's story is just a mission statement or a timeline of when you open different branch offices, you need to tear it down. Stop calling your pitch a story.
Right. And to fix this, we have to define the mechanics. What actually makes a story a story?
Okay, let's get into it.
The text, inspired by the work of business storytelling consultant Sean Callahan, introduces 6 specific, unbreakable attributes that define a narrative.
This is the checklist you need to run all your presentations through. So let's break these down deeply because this is where the mechanics come into play. Attribute number 1, a time indicator.
This is a phrase like back in 2012 or
Yeah.
last month or even the last time I was on vacation.
Just a timestamp.
Right. It signals to the listener's brain that something specific is about to happen. In a story, events occur in time. They do not exist in a vacuum of generalities.
Okay, attribute number 2, a place indicator.
I was at the airport in Boston, or it started in the cafeteria. This is rooted in how the brain processes information.
Abstract concepts do not happen in physical spaces.
But stories do. Grounding the narrative in a physical location allows the buyer to build a mental stage for the action.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you try to tell a story without mentioning where it happened, it feels incredibly awkward and untethered. The brain spends so much cognitive energy trying to figure out where we are that it misses the point of what you're saying.
Wow, okay. Attribute number 3, a main character. Usually in B2B sales, this is a person, a client, a developer, maybe yourself.
But it doesn't always have to be a human, right?
Right. In Chris Goeg's story at the art fair, the main characters were the pigs. It could be a company or even a brand. But there must be a subject experiencing the narrative.
The brain needs an avatar to latch onto for empathy.
Exactly. Which brings us to number 4, an obstacle. This is the villain of the story. It could be a rival company, a disease you are trying to cure, a shrinking budget, or even a faulty copy machine that ruins a critical presentation.
The obstacle is what creates the tension.
Yes, without an obstacle, you just have a sequence of pleasant, boring events.
Attribute number 5, a goal. The main character must have an understood objective. And crucially, it should be a worthy or noble objective in the eyes of the audience.
Like the pigs. They needed to find food to survive. That's a vital, understandable goal.
Exactly. A common mistake here is confusing your goal as a salesperson, which is to close the deal and hit your quota with the character's goal in the story you are telling.
Oh, that's a great point.
The buyer doesn't care about your quota, right? They care about the character trying to overcome the obstacle.
And finally, attribute number 6, which the text highlights as the absolute most important identifier. Events. Something has to happen.
Action is the engine of a narrative.
Wait, let me challenge you on this one because this is where a lot of sales reps get confused.
Okay, shoot.
What if I walk into a pitch meeting, I set up my laptop, and I play a glowing 2-minute video testimonial from my biggest client? The CEO of a Fortune 500 company looks right at the camera and says, "This vendor has amazing service, they are proactive, their software is incredibly fast, they never miss a deadline, and I highly recommend them." Is that a story?
It sounds like one.
Right. Because I've seen reps use that to close massive deals. It's highly persuasive.
Well, it is highly persuasive, and it absolutely belongs in your sales toolkit. If you have a CEO giving you a 5-star review, use it. But the text is firm on this, and the psychology backs it up. No, it is not a story.
Right.
It is a testimonial. It is a statement of opinion.
Because nothing actually happens in it.
Precisely. Where is the event? The CEO is just listing adjectives. proactive, fast, reliable.
Ah, I see.
If a narrative does not relay a sequence of events where a character interacts with an obstacle in a specific time and place, it is not a story. It doesn't transport the listener.
The buyer is still sitting in the conference room evaluating the CEO's claims.
Right. A story takes the buyer out of the conference room and puts them in the trenches with the character.
Okay, so the 6 unbreakable attributes: time, place, character, obstacle, goal, events. Run every anecdote you use through this 6-point checklist. If it's missing a time, place, or event, it's a pitch.
Let's actually put this to the test in real time. The author provides a sales story stress test with 4 different narratives to see how easily our brains get fooled by corporate speak.
This is a great exercise. I'm going to read the narratives exactly as they appear in the source material, but let's pause and analyze them as we go. You run the forensic analysis using the 6 attributes.
Sounds good.
Here is narrative 1. It's an infomercial-style pitch for teeth whitening. Okay, it goes. Are your teeth stained or yellow? Are you embarrassed to smile at parties or in pictures or videos, especially next to your friends with movie star smiles? Have you tried teeth whitening systems but given up after a few days because they made your teeth too sensitive?
Let's stop right there. Notice what's missing instantly.
There's no time indicator and there's no place. It's completely general.
Right. We have an obstacle yellow teeth and the pain of other systems. And we have a sort of generalized character, the abstract you, but we are floating in a vacuum. Keep going.
If so, Ultra White is right for you. It's the revolutionary new teeth whitening system designed by Hollywood dentists to give you star-quality whiteness without all the pain and discomfort. Ultra White involves a 2-step process that alternates applications between a high-impact whitening paste and a desensitization gel. The result is sparkling white teeth without any discomfort that would keep you from showing off your new Hollywood smile.
Okay, let's look at the rest of the checklist. We have a goal, whiter teeth. But most importantly, are there any events? Does anything actually happen?
No, not really.
Right.
It's just a description of a chemical process and a promise of a result.
Exactly. It might make for a highly effective advertisement. It hits pain points perfectly, but structurally, it fails the test. Result, not a story.
Okay, let's look at narrative 2. This is about a network security device.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, Dave Neild, the network service leader at the University of Leeds in the UK, realized he had a problem.
Pause. We already have 3 attributes locked in the first sentence.
Let's see.
Time, a couple years ago. Place, University of Leeds in the UK. Main character, Dave Neild. Our brain has built the stage. We are in the UK a few years ago looking at Dave.
Perfect. Let's see what happens to Dave. He was getting cease and desist orders and copyright violation notices from all over the world as a result of students using file sharing services like BitTorrent. In addition, many of the students were showing up in his office with computers infected by viruses. It took his staff up to an hour to clean up each one.
Boom, obstacle established.
The cease and desist orders.
Right, and the virus-infected computers. And the goal is inherently understood. He needs to stop the lawyers and fix the computers.
Okay, continuing. Dave agreed to do a test with Hewlett-Packard's Tipping Point network security device to see if that could help. When the test was over, he told us, as soon as we installed Tipping Point, we instantly stopped receiving copyright notices. That protected our students from getting threatened by lawyers, and it protected the reputation of the university. The university also got about 30% of its lost bandwidth back from the reduction in file sharing.
And there are the events. Students sharing files, the staff spending hours cleaning computers, and the physical installation of the tipping point device leading to a resolution.
It checks every single box cleanly. Result, a true story.
Yep, it passes.
Now let's look at narrative 3. This one is tricky because I guarantee this sounds exactly like what professional B2B salespeople call a story in the boardroom every single day.
Oh, sure.
It's about co-merchandising in a retail environment. Let's see if it fools you. You should be using your shoppers' planned purchases of toothpaste to sell more toothbrushes. Currently, shoppers buy toothbrushes only about every 6 months, despite the fact that dentists suggest replacing a toothbrush every 3 months, but your shoppers are already in your oral care aisle every 2 months to buy toothpaste.
This is the danger zone right here. Notice how persuasive the data is, but how completely ungrounded it is. We have no specific time, we have no specific place. The main character is a generalized concept of the shopper.
Well, let me keep reading because they introduce some specific details here.
Right.
If you co-merchandise toothbrushes with toothpastes, you could close more of your shoppers with toothbrushes. And toothbrushes help sweeten the profits for you as a retailer. The average toothpaste category profit margin is only X%, but the profit margin on toothbrushes is usually double that. And your own sales data show a dramatic increase in toothbrush sales when merchandised with toothpaste. Our February co-merchandising event delivered a 22% sales increase on toothbrushes over 3 weeks. That was YY million in incremental sales. This was by far the best toothbrush sales month of the year, even bigger than Christmas.
It sounds so compelling because it uses real metrics. But let's look at the mechanics. Time. It mentions February and Christmas in passing as data points, but the majority of the text doesn't take place in a sequential timeline.
In place.
None mentioned. The oral care aisle is a concept, not a specific location where an event is unfolding. Obstacle. Current merchandising practices. Goal. Sell more toothbrushes.
What about events?
It's a hypothetical hodgepodge of things the shopper might do and things the buyer did in the past.
The brain doesn't have a single narrative thread to follow. It's jumping from hypothetical future scenarios to past sales data.
Precisely. Because it lacks a grounded time, place, and a concrete sequence of events anchored to a specific character, it falls apart as a narrative. It meets 2 of the 6 criteria well and fails the rest.
So it's not a story.
It is a fantastic persuasive argument. It is an excellent pitch that you should absolutely use in a meeting, but it is not a story.
Which brings us to the final test, narrative 4. This is a personal anecdote. I just spent way too much money on my new road bike, which was white with bright orange highlights all over it. I unloaded it off my truck last week and was standing at the elevator doors of my loft. As the doors opened, I saw a girl from my building already standing inside.
The brain locks in immediately. Time, last week. Place, the elevator in the loft. Character, the unnamed narrator.
I had been wanting to meet her for some time. She gave a friendly smile as I entered. I see this girl all the time, and she runs and bikes constantly, so I knew she was going to comment on the new bike. I was just waiting for her to speak up. She kept looking my direction, clearly about to say something. When she finally opened her mouth, she said, "Is that a wood watch?" I had totally forgotten I was wearing my Sully Green sandalwood watch from Jord that day. "It's really cool," she said. At that moment, the elevator stopped on her floor, and she got out. Didn't even notice the bike. Might as well have been invisible. That watch gets so many comments, it's crazy. Thanks, Jord.
This is the easiest one to identify because even a child recognizes this structure intuitively.
Very relatable.
Obstacle, the difficulty of breaking the ice with the woman in the building. Goal, to finally meet her. Events, unloading the bike, entering the elevator, the quiet anticipation in the confined space, the unexpected conversation, and her leaving.
It hits all 6 criteria flawlessly. Result, a true story. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why did we just spend time stress testing these paragraphs?
Because you cannot mistake a good argument for a good story.
Right. You need both in your arsenal. You need the oral care co-merchandising pitch to justify the math for the procurement manager, but you need a tipping point story about Dave at the University of Leeds to engage the buyer's brain, build trust, and lower their defenses.
You have to recognize the mechanical differences so you can intentionally deploy the right tool at the right time.
If you try to use a pitch when the brain needs a story, you will face resistance.
And if you try to use a story when the brain needs hard data, you will look unprepared.
Ultimately, the soul of this chapter reveals a very empowering definition. A sales story is any story used in the process of earning a sale and maintaining a customer.
But, and this is the key, it only works at psychological magic if it honors the strict mechanics of narrative.
The 6 attributes.
Yes. It requires real characters, anchored in a specific time and place, facing a concrete struggle through actual events. When you build it correctly, using those 6 attributes as your blueprint, it stops being a transparent corporate pitch. It starts being a valuable asset in its own right.
Just like a simple photograph of a swimming pig. Now that you know exactly how to spot a real story and strip away the corporate jargon, you were probably wondering exactly why this structural formula physically alters a buyer's brain.
Oh, the science is fascinating.
What is actually happening neurologically when you drop those 6 attributes into a conversation? But that cognitive rewiring is exactly what we'll uncover in the next chapter.
The neuroscience behind it is truly the next frontier of understanding influence, and it proves why the human brain literally cannot resist a well-crafted narrative.
Think about the last major purchase you made for your business, or even for your own life. Were you actually convinced about a sterile spreadsheet of features and a bulleted list of benefits? Or did someone, somewhere, paint a scene in your mind with a character, a challenge, and an event that you simply couldn't forget?
What if the flawless PowerPoint deck, the meticulously gathered data and those bulletproof logical arguments you've spent weeks preparing are actually the very things killing your sales.
I mean, it is a terrifying thought, honestly.
Right.
You walk into a room armed with undeniable facts, and you're expecting this logical victory. You've done the math, you have the market research, and instead of a triumphant close, you just hit a brick wall.
Exactly. You have the perfect spreadsheet, you have the ultimate features list, but the room is completely dead.
Yeah.
The decision makers are, politely nodding, their eyes are glazing over, and you just know deep down you are losing them.
It's the worst feeling.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to completely dismantle the way you pitch.
We really are.
We're looking at a stack of sources centered around Chapter 2 of the book, Sell with a Story, alongside some fascinating psychological data to figure out exactly why storytelling is the ultimate non-negotiable tool for anyone in business.
Because it really is non-negotiable at this point.
Right. You are about to learn the hidden psychological, relational, and, frankly, economic mechanisms that make stories fundamentally outperform facts.
Yeah.
So whether you are an entrepreneur, a team leader, or just trying to win your next pitch, this is about understanding how to give yourself a massive, almost unfair advantage.
And I think what is so fascinating to uncover in this material is that this is not about abandoning logic or throwing away your data.
No, definitely not.
We are not telling anyone to stop doing their research. It's about understanding the fundamental architecture of the human brain.
Right. How we actually process things.
Exactly. We have this pervasive assumption in modern business that we are dealing with purely rational actors. Like, we look at a buyer or a client and we think, oh, this is a logic machine.
Just feed the data in.
Right. If I just feed the right data inputs into the machine will process it and output a yes and sign the contract.
Which would be nice.
It would be, but that completely ignores the biological and psychological reality of how human beings actually process information and make decisions. We are just not logic machines.
Right. And to understand that reality, we really have to look at what happens the exact second a buyer realizes they are being pitched to. It is like an alarm goes off in their nervous system.
It's a literal defensive reflex.
Really?
Yeah, the sources cite this prominent sales expert who describes this perfectly. He points out that the moment a buyer senses a traditional sales pitch is being slung their way, their mental door just slams shut.
Oh, I like that phrase. Mental door.
Yeah, they instantly adopt a defensive posture. It's a psychological bracing for impact. They prepare to be sold to.
I mean, I know that feeling so viscerally. Think about walking onto a car lot or even just wandering into a high-end retail store and someone approaches you with that specific, slightly overly enthusiastic tone of voice.
Oh, yeah, the pitch tone.
Immediately, your shoulders tense up, your breathing probably even changes a little bit. You're thinking, okay, what is the catch?
Yeah.
How is this person trying to manipulate me? I need to guard my wallet and guard my time.
That physical reaction you just described is entirely accurate. Your brain is literally releasing a tiny spike of cortisol.
Wow, really? Cortisol?
Yeah, that mental door is heavy. It is reinforced by years of bad experiences with aggressive salespeople. And once it is shut, your data and your bullet points are just bouncing right off of it.
So the facts don't even get in?
They don't. You can have the most compelling, empirically proven statistics in the world, but if the buyer is in that defensive state, they are not actually evaluating your data.
What are they doing then?
They are looking for the flaw in your argument so they can dismiss you and get back to their day.
That makes so much sense. So how does a narrative bypass that? Because the core claim we are examining here is that storytelling acts as a psychological bypass for that mental door. How does it get past the guard?
Well, it acts as a bypass because a story simply does not sound like a sales pitch. When you start telling a story, the buyer's brain does not trigger that defensive alarm. It doesn't recognize the pattern of a threat. Instead, it triggers a completely different cognitive pathway.
Like flipping a different switch.
Exactly. There's this brilliant conceptualization of this from a social psychologist at NYU. He argues that the human mind is a story processor, not a logic processor.
The story processor.
Yeah.
That is such a distinct way to frame it.
Yeah.
But what does a logic processor even look like in this context? Because obviously humans can use logic. I mean, we build bridges, we go to space.
We can use logic, yes, but it is not our native state, and it is incredibly energy intensive.
Okay, so it takes effort.
A lot of effort. A logic processor would be a computer.
Yeah.
It takes raw, abstract data points presented in a vacuum and instantly synthesizes them into an optimal decision.
Right.
But human brains did not evolve in a vacuum, and they certainly did not evolve looking at spreadsheets.
Definitely not.
For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors made sense of the world, of danger, of hierarchy, and of resources through narrative.
Through telling stories around the fire.
Right, through cause and effect involving human actors. We told stories about which berries made Uncle Ugg sick and how the rival tribe across the river behaved during a drought.
So it's baked into our DNA.
It is. When you hear a story, your brain is operating in its most comfortable default gear. You physically relax, you stop analyzing the incoming data for threats, and you start experiencing the narrative.
That makes total sense when you think about the physical energy in a room. It reminds me so much of being back in college.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, imagine you were sitting in a massive, sterile lecture hall. The professor is just droning on, writing complex mathematical formulas or obscure historical dates on the chalkboard.
Everyone is asleep or stressed.
Exactly. The entire room is tense. People are frantically scribbling notes, trying to memorize these abstract facts. It is cognitively exhausting.
Totally.
But then the professor puts down the chalk. They turn to the class, lean against the desk, and say, you know, when I was actually working in the field back in 1998, something crazy happened.
The whole vibe changes.
The entire physical energy of the room changes instantly.
You can literally hear the shift, can't you?
You hear a collective exhale. Shoulders drop. Students put their pens down, they lean back in their chairs, and they just listen. They are suddenly captivated.
Right.
The mental door just swung wide open.
And that is the exact physiological and psychological shift you are looking for in a high-stakes sales environment. You want the buyer to put the proverbial pen down, relax their shoulders, and just listen to you as a human being.
And stories are the specific mechanism that creates that shift.
They are, and the cognitive science backs this up extensively. Human beings make decisions subconsciously and emotionally first. First, always first. The amygdala in the limbic system process the emotional resonance of a situation long before the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of the brain, gets a chance to weigh in.
Wow.
We make the emotional decision, and then we use logic to justify that decision to ourselves and to others later.
Wait, hold on. If we are deliberately bypassing their prefrontal cortex, if we are dodging their logical defenses to hit their emotions first, isn't that essentially a Trojan horse?
I see where you're going with this.
Are we just manipulating people? Because phrasing it as bypassing their defenses sounds a little bit like we are tricking them into buying something they might not actually want.
That is a very common concern when people first encounter this material, and it is a totally valid ethical caution.
It just feels a little sneaky.
It can sound that way, but if we connect this to the broader picture of what communication actually is, it is not manipulation at all. It is simply speaking the brain's native language.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about it this way. If you traveled to France to sell a revolutionary new medical device, you wouldn't insist on speaking English.
Yeah.
Watch the French doctors stare at you in confusion and then accuse them of being stubborn for not understanding you.
Right, that would be ridiculous.
You would learn French, or you would hire a translator.
So story is just the native language of the human brain. You have to translate the data into narrative.
Precisely. You still need the facts. The product still absolutely needs to deliver on its promises. You're not lying to them or deceiving them about what the product does.
You're just changing the delivery method.
Right. You are simply wrapping the truth in the format that their brain is biologically hardwired to receive and understand. If you try to force raw logic on a brain that is locked behind a defensive mental door, you are the one failing to communicate effectively.
You're just talking to a wall.
You are ensuring your message is not heard at all. Storytelling ensures the message actually gets into the room.
That reframes it completely. It
Yeah.
is about removing friction from the communication process, not sneaking something malicious inside.
Exactly.
So think about your own pitch deck right now. If you walk into a boardroom and you can feel that defensive energy, when the arms are crossed, the faces are stern, and they are looking at their watches, do not bring out the data yet.
Hold the data back.
Use a narrative to lower the temperature. Tell a relevant, relatable story to get them to lean back and open that mental door before you introduce a single statistic about your product.
It is the crucial first step. But as the research in this chapter points out, opening the door is only half the battle.
Right, what's the other half?
Well, once the door is open and they are actually listening to you, you immediately encounter the next massive hurdle in business communication. How do you make sure the information actually stays in their brain after you pack up your laptop and leave the building?
Because buyers forget things. I mean, I forget things. We all live in a state of constant information overload.
They forget almost everything. And this leads us to the concept of the memory multiplier effect.
Ooh, memory multiplier.
Yeah, facts on their own evaporate from short-term memory almost instantly. If you want a buyer to remember your solution tomorrow or next week when they're sitting in a budgeting meeting actually making the purchasing decision, you must wrap those facts in a narrative structure.
I love the sound of that, but let's quantify it. How much of a difference does a story actually make when it comes to memory retention? Are we talking about a slight, 10% bump in recall, or is it something more significant?
Oh, it is a massive paradigm-shifting difference. There is a famous study conducted by a Stanford professor that illustrates this perfectly. He gave a very specific assignment to his university students.
Okay, what was it?
They had to give a 1-minute speech about crime.
Just 1 minute. That is barely enough time to clear your throat, let alone give a comprehensive overview of crime.
Exactly. It forces them to distill their message. Now, keep in mind, these are Stanford students. They are highly educated, smart, analytical people who have been trained for years to value empirical evidence.
They probably leaned on data.
Heavily.
Yeah.
In their 1-minute speeches, the average student used 2.5 statistics.
1 minute.
Yeah, they were throwing out crime rates, demographic data, geographic distributions, year-over-year percentage increases, all very logical, data-heavy academic speeches.
Sounds thrilling.
Right. But out of all those students, only 1 in 10 chose to tell a story during their speech, instead of relying heavily on data.
Only 10% used a narrative. The other 90% defaulted to the spreadsheet approach.
Correct. But here is where it gets really fascinating. After the speeches were done, the professor tested the audience to see what they actually retained from the presentations.
Oh, I can't wait for these results.
The results were staggering. When asked to recall the speeches, 63% of the audience remembered the specific details of the stories that were told.
63% recall for the stories. And what about the statistics that the vast majority of the students focused on?
A dismal 5% of the audience remembered any individual statistic.
5%.
Let that sink in for a moment. 63% versus 5%.
That is unbelievable. So if you are pitching with pure statistics, you essentially have a 5% chance of that data surviving in the buyer's mind by the time the meeting is over.
Pretty much.
But if you tell a story, you increase the survival rate of your information to 63%. That is not just a marginal improvement. That implies that pitching without a story is practically guaranteeing your own irrelevance.
It fundamentally changes the equation of how you prepare for a meeting. Because think about the reality of a complex sales cycle. It is almost never a one-call close.
Almost never.
You pitch on a Tuesday morning, but the internal buying committee at that company does not actually meet to discuss vendors until the following Thursday afternoon.
Right.
When that buyer is sitting in the committee meeting trying to advocate for your product against 3 other competitors, what are they going to say? If you just gave them a fire hose of statistics on Tuesday, 95% of your pitch has evaporated. They have nothing left in their cognitive arsenal to advocate with.
It's like trying to remember a complex Wi-Fi password or a phone number someone verbally told you 5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
Unless you repeat it constantly in your head, it is gone. It just vanishes into the ether because the brain has no reason to hold on to it.
But stories give it a reason.
Right. If I ask you to tell me the plot of a movie you saw 10 years ago, say The Matrix or Jurassic Park,
right,
you can probably give me a highly detailed scene-by-scene breakdown.
Oh, easily.
You can describe the characters, the tension, the resolution. You haven't studied that movie. You haven't taken flashcard notes on it. Your brain just naturally held onto it because it was structurally formatted as a story.
That is the perfect analogy, and it gets to the neurological heart of the matter. Our brains are sticky for stories and slippery for data.
Sticky for stories, slippery for data. I like that.
Yeah. The hippocampus, which is deeply involved in forming new memories, works closely with the amygdala, which, like we said, processes emotion.
Right.
When information has an emotional tag attached to it, which happens naturally during a story, the brain essentially flags it as important for survival and stores it more securely.
So it's an evolutionary thing.
Completely. The narrative structure, the characters, the conflict, the resolution acts like a cognitive scaffold. It gives a raw facts something to hang on to.
So practically speaking, you need to audit your presentations today. Look at your slide deck. If you have a critical statistic, a key differentiator, or a major feature that you absolutely need the buyer to remember next week, you cannot just list it as a bullet point.
No, you can't.
That is the 5% survival rate zone. You have to build a scaffolding around it.
Yes, you have to embed the fact within the narrative. Let's say you are selling enterprise software and your big selling point is reliability.
Okay, pretty common.
Right. Instead of just putting up a slide that says, our software reduces server downtime by 40%, you tell a story.
Give me an example.
You talk about Dave, a specific IT manager at a mid-sized logistics company who was losing his mind, getting frantic phone calls at 2 a.m. every weekend because their legacy servers kept crashing during peak international shipping hours.
Poor Dave.
Right. You describe his stress, the threat to his job, the impact on his family life. Then you describe how he implemented your software. You walk through the transition and how Dave now finally gets a full night's sleep on weekends because the downtime completely vanished.
That's so much better than a bullet point.
The buyer will remember Dave. They will remember the feeling of relief. And because they remember Dave, the 40% statistic will ride along in their memory like a passenger in a car.
That is so powerful.
Yeah?
Because you are attaching the data to a human experience.
Mm.
But we know that memory isn't the only hurdle, is it?
No, it's not.
Because I can remember a pitch perfectly. I could have 100% recall of your features and pricing. But if I think the salesperson delivering that pitch is a shark, I am still not buying. Memory doesn't matter if there is no foundation of trust.
Trust is the absolute bedrock. Without it, there's no transaction, no matter how good the product or the memory recall is. And the massive problem every salesperson, founder, or leader faces is that buyers, and people in general, default to distrusting strangers.
They really do. And going back to what we said earlier about the mental door and the cortisol spike, that distrust is the default biological setting.
Yes, it is.
We assume the person across the table, whose primary goal is to separate us from our company's money, does not have our best interests at heart.
And we have hard data to show just how deep that default distrust goes. There was a fascinating survey conducted by the New York Times and CBS back in 1999 that really illuminates this.
Okay, what did they do?
They asked people a very simple, straightforward question. Of people in general, how many do you think are trustworthy?
People in general. So they're asking about strangers, the collective public.
Right, the faceless masses. And the average answer was that only 30% of people in general are trustworthy.
20%. That is a pretty cynical baseline. Means if I meet 10 random people, I assume 7 of them might try to scam me. That is a tough crowd to sell to.
It is incredibly tough. But then the surveyors asked a second, slightly different question. Of people you know, how many do you think are trustworthy?
Okay, bringing it into the personal sphere. What was the jump?
The average answer shot up to 70%.
Wow. That 70% figure is wild. It implies that familiarity completely overrides our natural cynical defenses. We just turn our critical thinking off, or at least dial it way down for our friends and acquaintances.
It is the gap between losing a sale and winning one. When you walk into a prospect's office or hop on a Zoom call for the very first time, you are firmly in that 30% bucket. You are a stranger.
Right, they don't know you.
They default to assuming you're probably not trustworthy. Therefore, your primary objective before you pitch a single feature, before you talk about pricing, is to move yourself from the 30% stranger bracket into the 70% known entity bracket.
And sharing a narrative does that. Is telling a story really bridge that gap that quickly?
It is arguably the fastest and most effective way to do it. Because a well-told personal story provides a vulnerable glimpse into your world. It acts as a cognitive shortcut to familiarity.
A shortcut.
Think about it. Reading your resume or scanning your LinkedIn profile does not let someone get to know you. It just lists your professional specs.
Right.
Spending 5 years having lunch together every Friday would certainly build trust, but you don't have 5 years. In a sales meeting, you have 45 minutes.
So telling a story is essentially a compressed friendship. You are artificially but genuinely accelerating the intimacy.
Exactly. When you share a genuine story, perhaps a brief anecdote about why you are so passionate about the specific industry, or a story about a massive mistake you made early in your career and the painful lesson you learned from it, you instantly become human.
You're not just a suit anymore.
You step out of the archetype of the corporate salesperson and become a complex person with experiences, flaws, values, and a history. You are no longer just an avatar delivering a pitch.
This reminds me of a great point made in the text by a vice president at Costco Wholesale. He's been a senior buyer for 15 years.
Oh yeah, he's seen it all.
This guy has seen every slick pitch, every negotiation tactic, every slide deck imaginable. And he notes that in the real world of procurement, buyers are very often faced with ties.
Happens all the time.
Product A and product B might be remarkably similar. The pricing is within a few pennies of each other. The supply chain logistics are identical. The quality specs match. The metrics are a dead tie.
So how do you choose?
Exactly. How does a highly analytical buyer break the tie? He says they simply choose the salesperson they like and trust the most.
It is the ultimate undeniable tiebreaker. And let's be honest, there are a lot of ties in modern business. We live in an era of hyper competition. Commodities are everywhere.
Everything is a commodity now.
Software features are reverse engineered and copied within months. If your product is functionally identical to your competitor's product, the only remaining differentiating factor is the human relationship, the trust the buyer has in you as a partner.
I also noticed a fascinating psychological dynamic about this trust-building process in the reading. When you share a personal story with someone, it naturally prompts them to share a story in return.
Yes.
I like to think of it as extending your hand for a handshake. If I hold my hand out to you, social convention and human psychology demand that you shake it. It feels rude not to.
It really does.
Similarly, if I open up and tell you a brief, authentic story about my background or a struggle my company faced, it feels incredibly awkward for the buyer to just stare at me blankly and say, okay, fascinating, back to the pricing sheet.
Right.
They naturally feel compelled by the law of reciprocity to share something about themselves.
That is a brilliant observation, and it is a known psychological trigger. Reciprocal vulnerability. It completely transforms the dynamic of the room. It shifts the interaction from a monologue where you are pitching at them to a dialogue where you're conversing with them.
Which is what you want to be.
And here is the secret weapon of that dynamic. Once the buyer starts telling you their stories in return, they are unwittingly giving you the exact blueprint of their internal pain points, their personal career desires, and the hidden company politics that are blocking their progress.
That is gold.
They are handing you the keys to the castle, all because you initiated that cycle of vulnerability through a simple story.
So the immediate application for you listening right now, do not be a faceless corporate robot. Actively use personal storytelling to bridge that gap. Have a short, authentic, rehearsed but natural story ready about why you do what you do, or a time you helped a client solve a seemingly impossible problem.
Yes.
Use it early in the relationship to leap from the 30% distrust bracket into the 70% trust bracket, because trust is what ultimately gets the contract signed.
But here's where this entire concept shifts from psychology into hard economics.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
Trust helps you win the deal, yes. But stories can actually do something even more profound. They can change the literal monetary value of the physical thing you are selling.
Okay, wait. Let's dissect this, because on the surface, this sounds like absolute magic.
Yeah.
You were saying a story can actually fabricate economic value out of thin air.
It can.
You can make an object worth more dollars and cents just by talking about it.
It absolutely can, and it does it every single day. A story does not just passively describe a product. It imbues that product with tangible, increased value by moving it into a context the buyer can actually understand and care about. This is the concept of fabricating economic value through context shifting.
I am going to need a very concrete example of this,
Right.
because the rational part of my brain is screaming that a product is worth what the market dictates based on its utility and materials.
You would think so if we were the logic processors we discussed earlier. But let me tell you about one of the most incredible sociological experiments of the 21st century. It was conducted in 2009 by a journalist and an author. It is known as the Significant Objects Project.
Oh, I have read about this. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Set the parameters up for us.
So these two guys wanted to test a very specific hypothesis. Does narrative objectively transform insignificant objects into significant ones? And will people pay real money for that significance?
Right.
So they went to thrift stores, flea markets, and garage sales, and they bought 100 pieces of ordinary, everyday, discarded junk.
What kind of junk are we talking about? Give me some examples of the inventory.
Literal cast-offs, a cheap ceramic piggy bank, a cracked plastic toy horse, a wooden mallet, an old meat thermometer, a weird little Russian nesting doll.
Just totally random stuff.
The kind of stuff you find in the bottom of a donation bin. The average cost of these items was $1.29 each.
Okay, so they have a cardboard box full of cheap thrift store trinkets that nobody wanted. Then what did they do?
They reached out to a group of volunteer writers, novelists, essayists, creatives, and asked them to write short, completely fictional stories about each specific item.
So making up a backstory for a wooden mallet.
Exactly. So for example, take the cheap ceramic piggy bank. Instead of just listing it on a website with the description, a ceramic piggy bank with a coin slot on top, A writer crafted a poignant, slightly spooky story from the perspective of a little girl who genuinely believed the bank was cursed.
Okay, I like that.
She watched her father put his hard-earned pay into the pig, only to see the paper bills inexplicably turn into worthless coins and eventually disappear altogether.
That is a great little hook. It gives the object a totally different aura. So they take this $1.29 piggy bank, attach this fictional, slightly eerie story to the item description, and put it on eBay.
Yes, and this is the crucial part. They explicitly stated in the eBay listings that the stories were entirely fictional.
Oh, so they weren't lying to the buyers.
Right, they were not trying to commit fraud. They were not claiming these items were actually cursed or owned by historical figures. They transparently paired the physical object with the fictional narrative and put all 100 items up for auction on eBay.
Let me guess the outcome here. Because people found the stories entertaining, they tossed in a few extra bucks as a tip for the writer, so the bids went up a little bit.
It was far more dramatic than a small tip. Remember, they bought these items for an average of $1.29. The total out-of-pocket cost for all 100 items was exactly $128.74.
Okay.
After the eBay auctions closed, the total revenue generated from selling those exact same 100 items was $3,612.51.
That is, wait, what is the math on that? That is nearly a 2,800% increase in value.
A staggering 2,800% markup. The physical objects themselves did not change by a single atom.
No.
The ceramic pig was the exact same ceramic pig that had been sitting unwanted in a thrift store a week prior. It didn't gain a new feature, it wasn't polished, it wasn't upgraded.
The only thing that changed was the context.
The story attached to the object altered the buyer's internal emotional experience of that object. It gave the object meaning. And the grand takeaway from this experiment is that human beings are overwhelmingly willing to pay a massive premium for meaning.
That is incredible, but let's pressure test this. I can hear a listener right now saying, look, that is a really fun experiment. I totally get how a quirky, creative story can sell a piece of thrift store kitsch to a hipster on eBay who wants a conversation starter for their apartment.
Sure.
But my reality is different. I sell enterprise cloud storage infrastructure. I sell B2B logistics software. I sell heavy construction machinery to procurement boards. Does this concept of fabricating value actually apply to complex multi-million-dollar tech sales, or is this just a parlor trick for cheap consumer goods?
It absolutely applies to B2B and complex tech sales. In fact, I would argue it applies even more so, precisely because complex technology is inherently abstract and invisible.
That's a good point.
The psychological concept of context shifting is what makes this work across all industries. Think about it. When you sell a piece of enterprise software, if you just hand the buyer a technical spec sheet listing, gigabytes, processing speeds, API integrations, and encryption protocols, you are selling a commodity.
You are selling the $1.29 ceramic TIG without the story.
Exactly. And here's the danger. Commodities compete purely on price.
Right. If you only have specs, the buyer's procurement team will just take your sheet, find a competitor with the exact same specs, and demand you match their price, which is $1 cheaper. It is a race to the bottom.
Always. But a story alters the buyer's experience of what your product actually is. It contextualizes the value in their reality.
So how do you do that with software?
So instead of droning on about your 256-bit encryption protocols, you tell a story. You talk about a company, very much like theirs, that suffered a massive catastrophic data breach 6 months ago.
Set the scene.
You describe the absolute chaos that ensued on a Friday night, the millions of dollars lost in immediate class action lawsuits, the devastating PR nightmare, and the CEO having to sit under the glaring lights and testify before Congress.
It's terrifying just hearing it.
And then you explain how your software acts as an invisible, impenetrable shield that prevents that specific nightmare from ever happening. Suddenly, you are no longer selling a software license or a line of code. You are selling corporate survival. You are selling peace of mind.
You shift the context entirely. You move the conversation from abstract features, which they don't really understand anyway, to real-world visceral impact. You're imbuing the software with the emotional weight of security and success.
Yes. And just like those eBay buyers who were willing to open their wallets and pay 2,800% more for a piece of literal junk because of the emotional resonance of the story, corporate buyers are willing to pay a premium for a solution when they can viscerally feel its impact through a narrative.
That makes total sense.
Don't sell the commodity, sell the narrative attached to it. The story is not just marketing fluff, it is an intrinsic, inseparable part of the product's ultimate economic value.
That is a profound shift in perspective. The product isn't just the code or the metal or the service hours. The product is the code plus the story of what it does for the user.
Exactly.
So if you are listening to this, look hard at what you are selling. Are you just handing over a spec sheet? Are you just listing features? If so, you are actively leaving money on the table. You need to craft the narrative that contextualizes that value in the real world of your buyer.
And if stories have the power to literally increase the perceived value of your product, they also serve another absolutely crucial function in the modern marketplace. They become your ultimate, uncopyable, competitive differentiator.
Okay, explain that.
This is how you create a viral effect and stand out from the noise.
And standing out is harder than it has ever been in the history of commerce. Professional buyers are absolutely bombarded. They've seen every pitch, every beautifully designed slide deck template, every aggressive closing tactic from you, your competitors, and probably the 3 people who held your job before you.
Oh, absolutely.
It is a sea of sameness.
They are completely numb to it. There's a storytelling expert cited in the sources who makes a really salient point about this environment. He notes that people sitting in these endless corporate meetings are yearning, almost desperately, to hear something they do not already know.
Just something fresh.
They're starved for originality and genuine insight.
And a standard corporate pitch is the exact opposite of originality. It is usually a canned, legally approved script handed down by the marketing department, stuffed with meaningless buzzwords like synergy, optimization, and paradigm shift.
Exactly, it's white noise. But your unique personal story, or the specific story of how your company saved a client from the brink of disaster, that is the one thing that cannot be commoditized.
That's very true.
Your competitors can and will steal your pricing model. They will reverse engineer your best features. They will copy your website design. But they cannot steal the story of how you personally helped a specific client navigate a specific crisis. They cannot steal the origin story of why your founder started the company in their garage. It is a completely unique asset that belongs solely to you.
But the text also highlights another massive benefit here, beyond just differentiation, which is the viral contagiousness of a good story. How does a story travel through a company?
This is critical for complex B2B sales. One of the sales gurus mentioned in the book highlights a very hard truth about selling to large organizations. As a salesperson, you are almost rarely able to get all the actual decision makers in the room at the same time.
Right, it's a scheduling impossibility.
It is. You usually pitch to your main contact, maybe a mid-level manager or a director, but the ultimate purchasing decision requires sign-off from the VP, the CFO, and maybe the CEO.
And you are certainly not invited to that closed-door executive committee meeting. You are left waiting by the phone.
You are locked out. So your champion, that mid-level manager you pitched to, has to go into that intimidating executive room and essentially sell your product for you.
That's a lot of pressure on them.
It is. Now, this guru poses a brilliant rhetorical question to illustrate this problem. He asks, when was the last time you heard anyone ever say, "Wow, you're never going to believe this PowerPoint presentation I just saw. Let me recount the bullet points for you"?
Never. Literally never in the history of corporate America has that sentence been uttered.
No one repeats a PowerPoint. They can't. Without your meticulously designed slides, your laser pointer, and your perfectly rehearsed talk track, the pitch falls completely apart.
So what happens?
So your champion goes into that executive meeting, they get nervous, and they stumble through trying to remember your bullet points. Well, they have good synergy, and the optimization metrics are supposedly very fast.
And the message just dies right there.
The message dies in that room. The executives pass on the deal because they don't get it.
But people do repeat stories. We do it all day long, at the water cooler, at the dinner table.
Constantly. Human beings are, at our core, storytelling machines. It is how we transmit culture and information. If you tell your champion a compelling, memorable, emotionally resonant story about how your product saved a competitor from bankruptcy, they can effortlessly walk into that boardroom and retell that story to the CEO.
They don't need your slides.
They don't need your slides. They don't need your notes. They just recount the narrative arc.
I love thinking about this like a software update. When you tell a truly great story to your buyer, you are essentially installing a software update directly into their brain.
Oh, I like that.
You are giving them the exact code, the exact phrasing, and the exact emotional resonance they need to perfectly champion your product to the board when you aren't in the room to defend yourself. This story goes viral within the client's organization. It spreads from person to person.
That is a fantastic analogy. You are arming them with a benevolent virus that spreads your value proposition through the halls of their company. A traditional sales pitch stays trapped in the room where it was delivered. A great story travels the halls.
So, the immediate action item here is to ditch the canned script. The generic, marketing-approved pitch is actually holding you back from spreading your message. You need to craft your own original, memorable stories so that they can travel virally when you are not there.
Which leads us to the final and perhaps the most refreshing realization in this entire deep dive. All of this strategy we have discussed, the memory multiplier, the trust acceleration, the fabrication of economic value, the viral spread, it might sound like a highly calculated Machiavellian sales tactic.
Like a way to game the system.
Right, a way to game the system. But it's not.
It's not a trick. It is exactly what the buyers are begging you to do.
Yes, the research makes it abundantly clear. Storytelling fulfills deep buyer desires, and it actually brings the joy and the human connection back into the process.
We often forget that buyers are just regular people trapped in endless, boring, fluorescent-lit meetings. They are starved for narrative. There is some really telling research from Forrester Research conducted back in 2013 that highlights this massive gap between what salespeople do and what buyers want.
The Forrester study is incredibly eye-opening. They surveyed over 300 executive-level buyers, asking them to evaluate how prepared salespeople usually are when they come in for a pitch.
And what did they find?
The buyers reported that about 62% of the time, the reps were generally knowledgeable about their own products.
Which is really the bare minimum expectation. If you don't know your own product, you shouldn't be in the room.
Right, that is table stakes.
Yeah.
But then the surveyors asked a follow-up question. How often do the reps actually have relevant examples, case studies, or narratives to share that contextualize that product knowledge?
I'm guessing it dropped.
The number absolutely plummeted. Only 21% of the time did salespeople bring relevant stories to the table.
That is a shocking gap in execution. Basically, 80% of the time, buyers are sitting there being lectured at with dry product specs, completely starved of any real-world context, any human element, or any narrative.
It's sad, really.
It's no wonder they hate being pitched to. It is intellectual torture.
They find those robotic, canned pitches incredibly boring and a waste of their time. In the interviews conducted for the book, Procurement Professionals, the people whose entire salary job is to sit across a desk and listen to pitches all day were very explicit about this.
We want stories.
They want to hear stories. They want to know your company history. They want to know the origin of the product. They want to know the struggles you overcame to build it.
There's a great example in the text featuring that Costco buyer again. He talks about learning the history of the guy who started a massive detergent company.
Yes, the company that eventually became the massive operation, making the Kirkland Signature brand laundry detergent for Costco. This buyer learned that the founder was incredibly frustrated by the high prices and low quality of detergent on the market, so he literally started mixing chemicals and making soap in his own garage to find a better formula.
Now, if a sales rep just came into Costco and said, "Our company makes high-quality, affordable detergent," that is a boring, forgettable bullet point. It goes in one ear and out the other.
Yep, completely forgettable.
But hearing the story of a guy stubbornly mixing chemicals in his garage because he was so passionately frustrated with the status quo, that reveals grit.
Yeah.
It reveals integrity. It tells the buyer why the company exists, not just what they sell.
And buyers crave that deeper understanding. They want to know the character of the people they are getting in bed with. As the chief procurement officer for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania brilliantly observed, buying is like dating. If it's not organic and flowing, it's not going to work out.
I love that quote. Buying is like dating. If you go on a first date and the other person just sits down and hands you a bulleted list of their best qualities, I am highly synergistic, I optimize my free time, and my ROI as a partner is exceptionally high, you are going to run out of the restaurant.
You'd run fast.
You want them to tell you a story about their childhood or a funny, self-deprecating thing that happened at work. That is how you gauge their character. That is how you connect.
And that authentic connection is what makes the job actually sustainable for the salesperson, too. The final overarching benefit of this approach is simply that storytelling brings back the fun. It makes business human again.
Which might sound a bit fluffy or soft to a hard-charging, quota-driven sales director.
Yeah.
Fun. We're here to close deals and hit targets, not have fun.
It might sound soft, but it is deeply, ruthlessly pragmatic. If you are going to spend 20 or 30 years in a career delivering the exact same monotonous, canned PowerPoint presentation 5 times a day, you are going to burn out.
Your soul will be crushed.
Your soul will be crushed. You will sound bored. You will look bored. And if you sound bored, the buyer will mirror that energy and be bored.
And they won't buy.
Embracing storytelling makes the sales process organic. It turns a transaction into a human conversation. It makes us laugh. It surprises us. It creates genuine bonds between people. It is vital for long-term career survival and mental health.
Give the people what they want. Replace the bullet points with origin stories. Share the garage origin story. Share the disaster story where everything went wrong and how you fixed it. Make your meeting the absolute highlight of that buyer's day rather than the meeting they are dreading on their calendar. Be human.
If we pull all of these complex threads together, we can really synthesize the soul of this chapter and this entire philosophy. What the science, the economics, and the psychology are showing us is that selling, leading, and persuading is not a battle of facts.
Right.
It is not a high school debate tournament where the person with the most logical spreadsheet and the most statistics wins the trophy.
What is it then, if not a debate of facts?
It is an alignment of realities. You are trying to align your reality, the genuine value of your product or idea, with the buyer's reality, their daily pain, their deep-seated fears, and their goals.
Okay, I see.
And a well-crafted story is the only communication tool ever invented that operates on all the necessary levels to create that alignment simultaneously.
It is the ultimate cognitive multi-tool.
Exactly. In one fell swoop, a single good story lowers their defensive mental door, secures your message in their long-term hippocampus memory, accelerates human trust by triggering reciprocity, literally drives up the perceived economic value of your offering through context shifting, and gives them a viral, easily repeatable tool to sell your product to the CEO when you aren't even in the building.
So to bring this all home, this is not just a sneaky sales tactic.
Yeah.
It is the fundamental operating system of human connection and persuasion. You aren't tricking anyone. You are just learning how to code in the brain's native language.
And when you finally realize that, the entire paradigm of how you prepare for a meeting shifts forever. You stop staring at your computer screen asking, what data do I need to prove I'm right?
And what do you ask instead?
You start asking the much more powerful question, what story do I need to tell to make them truly understand?
We started this deep dive with that terrifying image. You are standing in the boardroom, you have the flawless PowerPoint deck, the meticulous data, the bulletproof logic, and you are watching the sale die right in front of your eyes as the room goes cold.
Yep.
Now you know exactly why that happens. You know why your brain and your buyer's brain are hardwired to reject the raw data and crave the narrative. The mental door is locked to logic, but it swings wide open for a story.
The theory is undeniable. The cognitive science and the real-world economics prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Which leaves us with the million-dollar question. Now that you know you need stories to survive and thrive in business, which specific types of stories do you actually need to build in your arsenal, and exactly when in the process are you supposed to deploy them?
That's the real trick.
Keep that in mind as you prep for your next big meeting, because that is exactly where we're heading next.
So back in 2009, there were these 2 researchers, Rob Walker and Josh Glenn.
Right. The Significant Objects Project.
Exactly. And they did this bizarre experiment that honestly just completely defied traditional economics, like totally broke the rules.
Oh, yeah. That was one of my favorite studies to talk about.
Right. So what they did was they went to all these various thrift stores, garage sales, and they bought 100 pieces of just absolute junk.
Like literal trash, basically.
Pretty much. I mean, we're talking discarded items like a cheap wooden mallet, a little plastic toy horse, a beat-up ceramic piggy bank.
Stuff you'd walk right past at a yard sale.
Exactly. And the average cost they paid per item was like $1.29. I think in total they spent maybe $128 for the whole lot of 100 items.
Which is already probably too much for what they bought.
Definitely. But then they took these identical items and they put them up for sale on eBay.
But they didn't change them, right?
No. That's the crazy part. They didn't alter them at all. No cleaning, no paint, no physical upgrades whatsoever. They just added one completely free, entirely invisible ingredient to the packaging,
The secret sauce.
the secret sauce. And weeks later, they sold those exact same junk items for over $3,600.
Which is what, like a 2,000% markup?
A 2,800% increase in value.
Yeah.
And today, in this deep dive, we are going to teach you, the listener, how to use that exact same invisible ingredient to answer the most terrifying, opportunity-killing question in the professional world.
It really is the ultimate magic trick of human psychology.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a trick that most professionals just desperately need.
Oh, desperately.
Yeah, because the way we currently try to create value, whether that's for our products or services or, just ourselves, it is fundamentally broken.
It is entirely broken. I mean, think about the last time you were at like a networking event, or maybe just a neighborhood barbecue or a cocktail party.
Oh man, the dreaded networking event.
Right. You know the scene perfectly. You're wearing a bad, sticky name tag. You are holding some lukewarm beverage.
Probably a bad Chardonnay.
Exactly. And you're trying to make polite eye contact, and then inevitably it happens. Someone turns to you and asks the question.
It's a question.
And it is not a question about your profit margins or, your company's ROI or your 5-year strategic vision. It is the completely innocent, entirely standard question. So what do you do for a living?
And that innocent question is the exact moment where about, I'd say 95% of professional conversations just go to die.
Yes, they just die right there.
It is the universal icebreaker, and yet it is handled with such universal incompetence by almost everyone.
You can physically feel it happen, too. You open your mouth to answer, and within about, 4 seconds of you starting your response, you can actually see the light live the other person's eyes.
They get that glazed over look.
They really do. They smile, they nod politely, but mentally, they have completely checked out. They are calculating the shortest distance to the appetizer table.
Or they're scanning the room over your shoulder looking for literally anyone else to talk to.
Yes. So in this deep dive into our source material today, and we're specifically focusing on Chapter 3 of Paul Smith's book, Sell with a Story, we are going to learn how to completely transform your professional introduction.
And this matters for absolutely anyone in business, by the way.
Anyone.
Right? Like whether you are a startup founder or a freelancer, a corporate executive, or even just someone looking for a new job, how you answer this single ubiquitous question dictates everything.
It dictates whether a prospect leans in with genuine curiosity or permanently tunes you out.
The stakes for that one little question are surprisingly high, much higher than we give it credit for.
Totally.
The sources we are analyzing today make a really compelling case that your introduction is the earliest and arguably the most critical opportunity you have to capture attention and build foundational trust.
And if you fail there, every subsequent part of your professional relationship is just an uphill battle.
Exactly. You're starting from a deficit.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We are going to help you completely abandon that boring standard elevator pitch. You know exactly the one I mean.
We all have one.
We all do. And we are going to replace it with 2 very specific types of introduction stories. Because honestly, I always think of the standard corporate elevator pitch as being exactly like a software terms of service agreement.
Wait, I love that. How do you mean?
Well, you know when you download a new app on your phone and you get that massive wall of legal text?
Oh, yeah, the thing you just scroll right past.
Right. Nobody actually reads it. Nobody would listen to it if it were read out loud. So when someone at a networking event starts reciting their corporate jargon, we all just mentally click accept as fast as humanly possible, just to make the boring part stop.
Just so we can get to the actual interaction. That is a phenomenal analogy.
Thanks. It just feels so accurate.
It is. The terms of service approach to introducing yourself is what the author refers to as the corporate yawner.
The corporate yawner. Perfect name.
And it is a psychological trap that almost every smart, capable professional falls into at some point.
Why is that, though? If we all hate hearing it, why do we all say it?
Well, we fall into it because we think we're supposed to sound polished. We think professionalism requires this very specific, elevated vocabulary.
Oh, right. We want to sound smart.
Exactly. So someone asks what we do, and we stand up straight and say things like, I represent a company that's best in class at optimizing the distribution paradigms for synergistic supply chain management across enterprise-level silos.
Oh, wow. I instantly want to walk away from you right now.
Right.
I literally feel a physical aversion to those words.
It completely fails to capture attention.
Yeah.
We have to ask why we do this. Why do incredibly intelligent people reduce their life's work to a string of meaningless buzzwords?
Yeah, what's the psychology there?
It is essentially a defense mechanism. We hide behind the jargon because
Good
it
line.
feels safe.
Yeah.
It feels authoritative.
It's like putting on a suit of armor.
Exactly. And it prevents us from having to be vulnerable. But in doing so, we fundamentally misunderstand what human beings are actually programmed to listen to. We think we are delivering this compelling summary, but we are really just listing features.
And when companies realize this isn't working, because they do eventually realize people are tuning out, they often try to pivot.
Right, they hire a brand engagement.
Yes, and they say, we need to tell our story. Our brand needs a story. But then they just show you a founding timeline on their website or like a logo redesign video or a list of talking points, and they just slap the word story on it.
Which is not a story.
No. Reading the source material, I realized we are fundamentally misusing the word story in the business world, like constantly.
They absolutely are. The business world has basically co-opted the word story to mean almost any collection of words that sounds vaguely inspiring.
Yeah, our brand story is synergy. No, it's not.
Exactly. A corporate mission statement is not a story. A list of product capabilities is not a story. A timeline of your company's mergers over the last 10 years is definitely not a story.
So, to understand the alternative to the corporate yawner, we really have to look at the strict criteria for what actually constitutes a narrative story.
Which the author outlines brilliantly in the text.
Let's get into that. What are the actual mechanics here? What turns a string of words into a story that the human brain actually recognizes as a narrative?
So, according to the source, a true narrative story has 6 very specific identifiable features. And if you want to replace your corporate yawner, you cannot skip these.
Okay, I'm taking notes. What's number 1?
First, you need a time indicator. The narrative has to be anchored in time. So it's something like back in 2012 or just last Tuesday.
Interesting. Why does that matter so much? Like, why can't I just say, sometimes we do this process?
Because a time indicator signals to the human brain that something specific and real actually occurred. It grounds the abstraction. It tells the listener, this isn't theory, this is an event.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Second, you need a place indicator. It has to happen somewhere physical. I was at the airport in Boston, or sitting in the boardroom in Chicago. Again, this allows the listener's brain to build a mental stage.
It's totally like setting the scene in a play. You know, before the actors even come out, you need to see the set so you know where you are.
Precisely. Which naturally brings us to the third element, a main character.
And crucially, reading the book, that character cannot just be synergistic supply chain paradigms.
No, absolutely not.
It has to be an actual entity, a person, usually. Something with a heartbeat or at least a relatable human perspective.
Yes, because humans have mirror neurons. We are biologically wired to empathize with other beings, not with abstract corporate concepts.
Right. We care about people.
Exactly. Fourth, you need an obstacle, a villain, a problem, a hurdle. Because without friction, there is no narrative tension.
So time, place, character, obstacle. What's 5?
Fifth is a goal that the character is trying to achieve. What do they want? What are they trying to get past the obstacle to do?
Okay, so we have time, place, character, obstacle, and goal. I mean, that honestly sounds like a lot to pack into a quick introduction.
It is, but the 6th element is the absolute most critical part, and it's the one businesses forget the most often.
What's that?
Events. Something actually has to happen. Action has to occur. Right. If you just state your product's amazing capabilities like, our software increases efficiency by 20%, that is not a story because no events occur.
It's just a fact.
It is just a static opinion or a statement of fact. Without a sequence of events like this happened and then this happened and therefore this happened, nothing is moving and you are just delivering a pitch.
All right, I hear all of this, and the English major in me absolutely loves it. But I feel like I have to push back a little bit on behalf of the listener here.
Go for it.
Because we live in a really ruthless, fast-paced business world, right? Everyone is incredibly busy. Attention spans are literally shrinking by the year. So if I am at a massive industry conference, or, you know, if I'm cold calling a prospect on a Tuesday morning, isn't a tight 10-second jargon-filled summary just vastly more efficient?
You're saying just get to the point.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I am respecting their time by getting straight to the point. Is a story really the right tool when someone just wants to know what box to mentally put me in?
It is a totally valid caution, and honestly, it is the exact reason people cling so tightly to the elevator pitch. We essentially worship at the false god of efficiency.
The false god of efficiency. I like that.
But the source text firmly refutes this idea, and the underlying logic is profound. Efficiency in communication is completely worthless if it yields zero engagement or retention.
Wow. Okay, so it's about efficiency of transmission versus efficiency of retention.
Exactly. Think about it like a manufacturing process. What is the point of being incredibly efficient at pushing a product off the assembly line if every single unit goes straight into a dumpster?
Right, you're just efficiently creating trash at that point.
Yes. And that is what the corporate yawner does. You transmit the information in 10 seconds flat, but the listener immediately discards it from their memory.
It just goes into the mental spam folder.
Exactly. As the author points out, a genuine conversational 40-second story will always, every single time, beat 10 seconds of unhelpful, overly scripted boredom.
Even though it takes longer.
Even though it takes longer.
Yeah.
You might take 30 extra seconds to answer the question, but those extra seconds are the difference between a glazed-over look and a follow-up question.
So it's really the difference between efficiently failing and slightly less efficiently succeeding.
Perfectly said.
And if I can guarantee they actually remember who I am, it is absolutely worth an extra half a minute of their time.
Absolutely. So if the corporate yawner is a trap, we have to look at the alternative. And that leads us directly into the first specific tool you can use to introduce yourself at that networking event.
Yes. Let's get into the practical tools here. The first type of story the book recommends is what they call explaining what you do simply. The goal here is to explain your job in a way that is actually meaningful to a potential prospect, but without putting a layperson to sleep with jargon.
Which is harder than it sounds.
It is. But
Yeah.
here's where it gets really interesting. This first story type is uniquely easy to craft because it is entirely hypothetical. It is completely fictional.
It relieves so much pressure, doesn't it?
So much.
Because when people hear they need to tell a story, they often panic. They think they have to rack their brain trying to remember the exact dates or specific details of a past client interaction.
And doing that on the spot is super stressful.
Exactly. But with this first tool, you just rely on your general knowledge of your industry and the typical problem that your company solves, and you just invent a highly plausible narrative around it.
The book gives this incredibly vivid example that I just love. Let's say you work in logistics and supply chain software, right?
Notoriously dry topic.
Very dry. You were at a barbecue, someone asks what you do. Instead of the corporate yawner about synergistic distribution algorithms, you just look at them and say, suppose you're in the chicken business.
Notice what that does instantly. You establish a hypothetical main character, you, and a highly relatable, tangible industry, the chicken business.
Everyone knows what a chicken is.
Exactly. No one knows what a synergistic paradigm is.
Right. So you say, suppose you're in the chicken business. You have to get the chicken from the farm to the processing plant, to the packaging facility, to the distribution center, and finally to the retail grocery store before it spoils.
You're setting the baseline process.
Exactly. But then you say, but inevitably a truck breaks down, or a massive snowstorm hits, or there's a labor strike, and the whole logistical process turns into this enormous, foul-smelling hairball.
Oh, man. Foul-smelling hairball. It is such a visceral, gross, and incredibly effective image.
It really is.
You can almost smell the problem.
You really can. And then after you've painted this disastrous picture, you conclude with just one single sentence explaining your role.
The resolution.
Right. You say, so basically what I do is look at all those steps in the process and figure out a way to get the software to make it run faster and smoother so the chicken gets to the store fresh.
Ooh.
Boom! That takes maybe 40 seconds. I know exactly what you do. I understand why it matters in the real world, and I was actually entertained.
It's brilliant. Let's break down the anatomy of how the listener can construct this for themselves. Because the blueprint provided in the text is very clear, and you can replicate it for literally any industry.
Okay, let's build the framework step by step.
Step 1. Invent a main character in a typical industry that you serve. Keep it simple. So, suppose you manage a large urban hospital, or imagine you are the IT director for a mid-sized regional bank.
Okay, simple, relatable character. Got it.
Step 2. Describe a plausible series of events leading to a massive problem. Walk through the daily steps of their job until they hit that foul-smelling hairball moment.
So like the server crashes during a massive transaction, or the emergency room runs out of a critical supply.
Exactly. Make the problem real. And then step 3. Finish with a single, jargon-free sentence describing how your solution fixes that specific problem.
Just one sentence.
Just one. You don't need to list every feature of your software. Just say how you get the chicken to the store fresh.
I love how visual this framework is. Honestly, it makes me think of how Hollywood cuts a movie trailer.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. If the brain is trying to decide whether to invest time in you, it's just like a moviegoer deciding what ticket to buy. When you see a trailer for a new action blockbuster, they don't hook you by having the director come on screen to explain the types of high-definition cameras they use.
Or what the catering budget was.
Exactly. Or the corporate financing processes behind the film studio.
Even though all those things are essential to the movie actually existing?
Right. But they don't hook you with the process. They hook you by showing the explosion. They show the hero hanging off the edge of the cliff in mortal danger.
The stakes.
Yes. In your professional introduction, your corporate processes, your software features, your daily tasks, those are the cameras and the microphones. Nobody cares about them yet.
They haven't earned the right to care about the cameras yet.
Exactly. You have to show them the explosion, the chicken business hairball first. You have to show them the stakes. Once they care about the explosion, then they will naturally ask about the cameras.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You have to show them the stakes before you show them the solution. And the source text actually offers a great, highly practical acid test for whether you have successfully crafted this simple hypothetical story.
Oh, I remember this, the family test.
Yes, the family test.
Yeah.
Can you tell this story to your mom, your spouse, or your 10-year-old kid, and do they actually understand what you do for a living?
That is the ultimate crucible. If an industry expert can explain it to a 10-year-old, they really know their stuff.
It really is. Because if you use the corporate yawner, your kids will have absolutely no idea what you do. They'll just know you, like work on a computer and send emails.
Yeah, mom types on a keyboard.
Right. But if you tell the hypothetical chicken story, they get it instantly. If your story passes the acid test with your family, it will absolutely pass the test at a networking event with a highly distracted prospect.
Okay, so we know how to tell this first type of simple hypothetical story, but I want to dig much deeper into the why.
The psychology.
Yes. What are the hidden gears turning in the listener's brain that make this so much more effective than a list of features? Because the book goes pretty deep into the underlying science of the introduction. Why does this work on a biological level?
It is fascinating stuff. And this is where we connect the tactical goal of Chapter 3 with the underlying cognitive science mentioned throughout the broader text.
Right, because it's not just a neat trick, it's biology.
Exactly.
Right.
Why does storytelling work when a sales pitch shuts a buyer down? It all comes down to evolutionary biology and how our brains are physically wired. The text references the renowned social psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
Oh, yes. I love his work.
He makes this profound observation that I honestly think should be written in giant letters on the wall of every sales department. He says, "The human mind is a story processor, not a logic processor."
Let that sink in for a second. A story processor, not a logic processor.
It changes everything.
It does. Because we think we are these highly rational, logical beings, especially in business, but we really aren't.
We aren't. For decades, cognitive science and evolutionary biology have shown that human beings make rapid, subconscious emotional decisions in the limbic system.
And the limbic system is what exactly?
The limbic system is the ancient, emotional, survival-oriented center of the brain. It processes things instantly. And then, only after the decision is made emotionally, do we justify those emotional decisions logically in the neocortex, which is the newer, rational part of the brain.
Okay, so if you are introducing yourself with a logical list of facts, data points, and rational arguments, which is your standard elevator pitch, you are literally speaking to the wrong part of the brain.
Exactly. You are trying to influence them logically in the neocortex, but their limbic system hasn't decided emotionally yet whether it even likes you or trusts you.
Okay, I've got an analogy for this. If the brain is a nightclub,
Ooh, okay.
the neocortex, that logical part, is the giant bouncer standing outside with a clipboard.
I can see it.
If you walk up to the bouncer reciting your ROI, your synergistic paradigms, and your strategic visions, the bouncer instantly spots you as a salesperson. You are a threat to their time and energy. The bouncer crosses his arms and denies you entry. Your pitch is blocked.
Access denied.
But a story doesn't use the front door. A story goes through the VIP entrance directly into the limbic system. The bouncer doesn't even know you're in the building until the emotional brain has already bought you a drink and decided it likes you.
That is exactly the biological mechanism at play. That's a perfect analogy. As one of the sales experts in the book notes, the moment a buyer senses a sales pitch is being slung their way, their mental door slams shut.
The bouncer blocks the door.
But a story doesn't sound like a sales pitch. It sounds like a normal, ancestral, human campfire conversation. When we hear a story, our brain literally releases oxytocin, the bonding chemical.
Wow, oxytocin.
Yeah. The buyer relaxes their shoulders, they lean back, their mental defenses drop, and they just listen.
And beyond just getting them to listen, the source text talks about how this mechanism instantly builds trust. There is a fascinating, almost scary statistic in there about human trust.
Ooh, the 30% rule.
Yes, if you survey people and ask them, generally speaking, how many people do you think are trustworthy? The average answer is about 30%. We default to a posture of not trusting strangers.
Which makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint, right?
Right.
Trusting everyone outside your immediate tribe used to get you killed.
Exactly, it's a survival trait. But if you ask those exact same people, how many of the people you personally know are trustworthy, the number shoots all the way up to 70%.
That 40-point gap is massive.
It is.
It means that when you walk up to a prospect at a networking event, or when they pick up your cold call, you are automatically sorted into the 30% category. You are a stranger, an outsider, and therefore, by default, you are not fully trusted. You are a potential threat.
So the multi-million-dollar question is, how do you crock that gap? How do you get from the 30% stranger category to the 70% friend category without spending like 10 years building a relationship?
That is what the story does. A story provides an intimate, authentic glimpse into your world, your values, or your way of thinking. When you tell a story, you simulate a shared experience.
It's like a shortcut for the brain.
It is. It tricks the brain into categorizing the stranger as an in-group member. It serves as the absolute shortest distance between stranger and friend. It moves you from the 30% distrust category to the 70% trust category exponentially faster than reciting a resume ever could.
And this brings us all the way back to the crazy experiment I mentioned at the very beginning of this deep dive, the eBay thrift store experiment.
Let's tie it together.
We have to fully unpack this because it perfectly illustrates the power of narrative to literally manifest economic value out of thin air.
The Rob Walker and Josh Glenn Significant Objects Project. Yes, it is one of the most compelling proofs of narrative value ever recorded.
Okay, so let's look at the mechanics of what they actually did. As I said, they bought 100 ordinary, cheap, entirely unremarkable used objects from thrift stores. A wooden mallet, a plastic pink horse, a ceramic piggy bank. Total cost $128.
Right.
Then they asked a group of volunteer writers to write short, fictional stories about each specific item.
And we should clarify, these weren't deceptive stories claiming the items were owned by a celebrity or made of solid gold. Right?
No, not at all. They were clearly labeled as fiction. For the cheap ceramic piggy bank, they didn't say, this belonged to George Washington. Instead, the writer created this really poignant fictional story about a little girl who thought the piggy bank was cursed.
Cursed.
Yeah. In the story, her dad would put his paper paycheck into the slot, and only cheap metal coins would come out the bottom. So as a kid, she thought the pig was eating her family's money.
Oh, that's a beautiful, slightly melancholy little narrative.
It is. It has character, it has an obstacle, it has events. And then they put these items on eBay. The item description was only the fictional story. They explicitly told the buyers, this story is fiction.
So there's zero deception.
Zero. The buyers knew they were buying a dollar store piggy bank with a made-up story attached to it.
And the results were just staggering.
They sold all 100 items. Originally, they paid $128 for the lot. They sold them for over $3,600.
Incredible.
That is a 2,800% increase in value purely because of a story. A fictional story turned a cheap, insignificant object into something highly valued by the limbic system of the buyer.
The emotional brain wanted it.
Yes, the buyer's emotional brain wanted the object because it was now anchored in narrative meaning, and then their logical neocortex, the bouncer, justified spending $30 on a $1 item.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of your professional introduction, the implications are profound. Storytelling is not just a nice-to-have soft communication skill. It is a hard economic driver.
It literally creates cash value.
It does.
Yeah.
It increases trust, it bypasses defensive barriers, and it literally increases the perceived value of whatever it is attached to. If a story can increase the value of a discarded wooden mallet by 2,800%, imagine what it does for the perceived value of your software, or your consulting services, or your own personal brand when you introduce yourself.
Okay, I am entirely sold on the psychology and the economics. The hypothetical story, like our chicken example, gets the bouncer to let you into the club. It drops their guard, it helps them understand your job simply, it builds trust, and it raises your perceived value.
Right.
But I have to admit, this raises a really important structural question for me. How do you transition from a prospect simply understanding what you do to them actually hiring you to do it? Because at a certain point, a hypothetical story about a chicken isn't going to close a multi-million-dollar B2B contract with a highly skeptical executive.
No, it's not.
Fiction is safe for a cocktail party, but if I'm pitching a massive deal, fiction feels flimsy. We need real ammunition.
That is the exact limitation of the first story type. It is the perfect icebreaker. But when you are talking to a highly qualified prospect who actually holds the purse strings, you need to go deeper. You need to provide evidence.
So what's the next tool?
That necessity introduces the second, more advanced type of introduction story covered in Chapter 3, the Whom I've Helped and How story.
Okay, so this is where we leave the hypotheticals behind entirely. We move from fiction to nonfiction.
Exactly. The second story relies entirely on real historical examples from your career. As the source material explains, the core goal here is to entice the prospect into wanting a deeper meeting by giving them a vivid glimpse of what they will miss out on if they don't hire you.
FOMO. Fear of missing out.
Yes. You want to show them real results, real stakes, and real competency, but without ever sounding like you were aggressively bragging.
And there is a phenomenal high-stakes illustrative example of this in the sources. Honestly, it reads like a tense scene in a movie.
It really does.
It involves a guy named Ben Coburna, who works for a procurement software company called ES, and Quave Burton, who at the time was a very powerful global procurement executive at the retail giant Abercrombie & Fitch.
This is a textbook example of how to handle an aggressive, high-pressure introduction where the buyer is actively trying to reject you.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So, Ben and Quave were at a supplier networking event that was set up exactly like speed dating.
Which sounds like my absolute nightmare. Explain how this speed dating format works in the corporate world for those who haven't suffered through it.
Right, so the buyers, like Quave, sit at a table. The suppliers, like Ben, sit down across from them. The supplier has exactly 15 minutes to pitch their services and justify their existence. Then, a loud bell rings, everyone stands up, and the suppliers rapidly rotate to the next table.
Oh man, so you have a ticking clock, an exhausted executive who has probably heard 20 pitches already, and extreme pressure.
The worst conditions possible.
So Ben sits down across from Quave. And Quave, being a sharp, busy executive who knows exactly what she wants, takes one look at his badge and immediately dismisses him.
Right out of the gate.
She says, "Look, I only buy direct materials. Your company does reverse auctions for indirect goods. Your software doesn't work for what I buy."
We should pause here and define the jargon so the listener really understands the immense stakes of this rejection.
Yes, please. Because for the listener who isn't in corporate procurement, what exactly is a reverse auction, and what is the difference between direct and indirect materials?
Good call. So a standard auction is where one seller has an item and multiple buyers bid the price up to win it. Think of an art auction.
Right. Going once, going twice, sold to the highest bidder.
Exactly. A reverse auction is the exact opposite. In a reverse auction, the buyer holds all the power. One buyer wants a service, and multiple suppliers bid the price down to win the contract. Ben Software runs these reverse auctions.
Okay, got it. And the direct versus indirect materials, what's the difference there?
Direct materials are the actual literal components that go into the product a company sells. For Abercrombie & Fitch, direct materials are the cotton, the denim, the zippers, the cashmere. It's the core of their business.
Right.
Indirect goods are the supplies needed to run the company, but not make the product. The office toilet paper, the printer ink, the desk chairs.
Ah. So by saying Ben Software is only for indirect goods, Quave is essentially telling him he is in minor leagues.
She's completely dismissing him.
She's saying, you sell toilet paper logistics, I buy the actual clothes, we have nothing to talk about. She is telling him the meeting is over before the 15-minute clock even really starts.
Precisely. Now consider how the average untrained salesperson would react to that direct, factual objection.
They probably panic.
They would likely become immediately defensive. The bouncer's pushing them out the door, so they push back. They would start reciting facts and data to prove her wrong. Actually, Quave, you are mistaken. Our software is fully capable of handling direct materials, and here is a white paper and a list of features that prove it.
Which just makes the buyer dig their heels in even further.
They would meet resistance with pure resistance.
It turns the introduction into a debate. And nobody, especially not a high-level executive, wants to lose a debate to a salesperson they met 30 seconds ago. If you tell an executive they are wrong, they will spend the rest of the meeting trying to prove they are right, rather than listening to you.
Exactly. It triggers cognitive dissonance. But Ben doesn't do that. He doesn't argue. He doesn't say she is wrong.
He bypasses the bouncer.
He bypasses the bouncer. He tells a story. He says, I understand. Let me tell you about a massive reverse auction we just ran for cashmere for a big clothing manufacturer.
It's a brilliant pivot. He immediately hooks her attention because cashmere is exactly in her direct materials wheelhouse.
Right. Ben details the story rapidly. He explains that they had 20 global suppliers all logged into his software, simultaneously bidding to supply this massive order of cashmere.
Okay, time, place, characters, events.
Exactly. During the live auction, a bid came in from a Chinese supplier that was shockingly, unbelievably low. It was so low that Ben's team actually paused the software, stopped the entire global auction, and made an emergency phone call to the supplier in China because they assumed the supplier had made a typo with the decimal point.
Because in that industry, if a price is too good to be true, it usually means the quality is garbage or it's an outright scam.
Exactly. But it wasn't a typo. The Chinese supplier explained on the phone that they had just had a massive multi-million-dollar order unexpectedly canceled by a Russian buyer. Their entire warehouse was completely full of premium cashmere. They were bleeding money, and they were desperate to liquidate the inventory just to free up space. They were willing to take a massive loss.
And the result of uncovering this, the clothing manufacturer got an unbelievable once-in-a-lifetime deal on premium cashmere, generating huge savings. And the procurement director at that manufacturer looked like an absolute hero to their CEO.
And what was Quave Burton's reaction to hearing this 2-minute story? She immediately pulled out her calendar and booked a full, formal meeting with Ben for the following week. She still had over 10 minutes left on the speed dating clock, but she had heard enough. She was sold.
It is absolute verbal judo. I love it so much. Think about what just happened there. Instead of meeting resistance with resistance like, actually, you're wrong, Quave, we can do direct materials, Ben used the momentum of a narrative to flip her perspective entirely.
He didn't fight her momentum, he redirected it.
Right. He overcame a massive, fatal objection about his company's core capabilities without ever once uttering the words, "You are wrong." He just told a story about a reality where she was undeniably wrong and let her own brain draw the conclusion.
That is the immense power of the Whom I've Helped and How story. It allows the buyer to actively participate in the discovery process. By the time Ben finished the story about the Chinese cashmere, Quave realized on her own that his service worked perfectly for direct materials.
And people love their own ideas.
Exactly. When people come to a conclusion on their own, they believe it much more strongly and defend it much more fiercely than if you try to force them to believe it with logic.
Okay, this is a masterclass in sales psychology, but how do we make this actionable for you, the listener? Because hearing Ben's story is incredibly inspiring, but if you don't know the underlying architecture, it's really hard to replicate.
We need to deconstruct it.
Yes, we need to deconstruct Ben's story so you can build your own version of this verbal judo.
Fortunately, the source material provides a very clear, step-by-step blueprint for deconstructing and building this exact type of success story. It follows a specific narrative structure that is designed to maximize emotional impact without wasting a single second of the buyer's time.
Let's walk through mapping a past success onto this framework, using Ben's cashmere story as our structural guide.
Let's do it.
Okay, I have my notepad ready. Step 1 in the blueprint is the hook, or what the book calls the transition in. And the author has one massive, unbreakable rule here: never, ever use the word story.
Yes, the dreaded S word.
Why is it so bad?
If you were in a professional setting and you say, let me tell you a story, you instantly sound like you were wasting their time. It signals a timeout from reality. Or worse, it sounds like you were talking down to them like a kindergarten teacher.
Gather around, children.
Exactly. You also shouldn't ask for permission. You don't say, can I share a quick example with you? You just launch into it smoothly as an organic part of the conversation. Ben's hook was simple, respectful, and highly relevant. I understand. Let me tell you what we did for a big clothing client.
It bridges the gap seamlessly from her objection to his evidence.
Exactly.
Next up in the blueprint is the context. You have to establish the who, the where, and the when incredibly quickly. The audience needs to be oriented on the stage, but they don't need unnecessary set dressing.
Right. In Ben's case, the context was just setting up the premise. A major clothing manufacturer running a reverse auction with 20 global suppliers for cashmere. That's it. It takes maybe 10 to 15 seconds to establish, but gives the listener everything they need to understand the scale and the stakes of the situation.
Then comes step 3, the challenge. This is the catalyst. It's the monkey wrench that gets thrown into the gears of the machine. Up until this exact moment in the narrative, everything is normal and routine. Then, bam.
The inciting incident.
Right. In the cashmere story, the challenge is the insanely low bid from the Chinese supplier. It disrupts the expected flow of events and creates immediate intrigue in the listener's mind. Why is it so low? Is it a scam? Is the software broken?
Which leads directly into the fourth and most critical part of the blueprint, the conflict. This is where you show the honest struggle to overcome the challenge. And the author emphasizes a concept here borrowed directly from Hollywood screenwriting: arrive late, leave early.
I love that phrase so much. Arrive late, leave early. It is the absolute secret to pacing.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean in the context of a business introduction?
Think about a great scene in a James Bond movie. The scene doesn't start with Bond waking up, brushing his teeth, driving to the villain's lair, and parking his car.
Oh, that's boring.
Right. It starts with him already dangling over the shark tank. That's arriving late. You jump into the action as close to the climax as possible, and you leave as soon as the point is made.
I see.
In a business story, you don't need to explain the 3 weeks of tedious email preparation before the reverse auction. And you don't need to explain the 2 months of shipping and customs logistics afterward.
You focus purely on the moment of maximum tension.
Exactly. For Ben, the conflict was pausing the auction, making the tense emergency phone call to China, investigating the potential error, and uncovering the truth about the Russian cancellation. That is the conflict. It shows your company actively, competently solving a high-stakes problem in real time.
And finally, step 5. You hit the resolution and the lesson. This is where you explain the final outcome, but you have to do it specifically in a way that highlights the tangible benefit to the customer.
This is crucial.
Ben didn't end the story by patting himself on the back. He didn't say, and so our software worked perfectly and proved my company is awesome.
No, he made the client the focus.
Right. He ended it by saying the client got massive financial savings and the procurement director looked like a genius hero to their boss.
That distinction in the resolution is vital. The resolution must focus on the value delivered to the client, not the brilliance of your tool. It proves to the prospect sitting across from you that you understand what they actually care about, their own success and their own reputation.
So here is your specific homework if you're listening to this deep dive to prepare for a networking event, a job interview, or, a major sales call. I want you to brainstorm just one single past client success. Think of a time you or your company truly helped someone overcome a difficult problem.
Just one is all you need to start.
Right. Now run it through this exact 5-step blueprint. Write down your smooth transition hook without using the S word. Jot down the quick context. Pinpoint the monkey wrench challenge. Outline the honest struggle of the conflict, remembering to arrive late and leave early. Cut out the boring logistics. And finally, define the resolution strictly in terms of how it made the client look good.
Write it down, practice it out loud.
Yes. Do this mental exercise before your next event, and you will be armed with a narrative tool that can completely pivot any conversation.
It is a phenomenal, highly practical exercise. And honestly, it brings us to a really important synthesis of everything we've covered in this deep dive into Chapter 3.
What's the main takeaway?
If we step back from the tactics, the psychology, and the blueprints and look at the absolute soul of this chapter, the overarching insight is this. Your professional introduction is not a verbal resume. It is not an audio version of your LinkedIn profile.
Right.
And it is certainly not a race to cram as many features, benefits, and industry buzzwords into a 10-second window as possible.
It is not a terms of service agreement.
Exactly. It is your earliest, most potent opportunity to translate the abstract, invisible value of what you do into a vivid, relatable narrative that the limbic system can actually process.
To give them the secret sauce.
Right. Whether you are using a hypothetical story like the foul-smelling chicken hairball to explain a complex job simply to a layperson, or whether you are using a real hard-hitting success story like the Chinese cashmere to overcome an executive's objection, the principle remains the exact same.
Story over stats.
Clarity and intrigue come from narrative, not from strategy speak. The human brain is desperate for context and emotion. When you give them a story, you give them a reason to care, and when they care, they listen.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. When you are constructing these introductory stories in your head, when you are standing there in the crowded room with your lukewarm beverage trying to make a lasting impression, who is the actual hero of the story you are telling?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Right. Are you positioning yourself and your company as the knight in shining armor who swoops in to save the day? Or are you telling the story in a way that allows the prospect to envision themselves as the hero, using your tools as the sword to achieve greatness? Because if Ben's story about the procurement director taught us anything, it's that buyers ultimately want to be the hero of their own story.
That is a critical shift in perspective. You are not the hero, you are the guide. They are the hero.
You now know how to introduce yourself to the buyer, how to bypass the bouncer, and how to get them to lean in with genuine curiosity. Next time, we are going to explore something even more surprising. We will be diving into the vital, deal-making stories that you must tell yourself in your own head before you ever even walk through their office door. Until then, go find your story. Most people think the secret to being, a master salesperson is just having the perfect pitch.
Oh, yeah, the perfect script.
Right, exactly. Like, we all know the archetype, right? We picture that person who can just talk their way out of anything.
The smooth operator.
Yeah, the smooth operator who dazzles you with features and benefits and just like this undeniable onslaught of logic. I mean, we are conditioned by movies, by corporate culture, really by decades of business mythology, to believe that if you want to win, you have to hold the microphone.
So it has to be the loudest one in the room.
Exactly. But what if the real secret is actually getting the other person to do the talking?
Which is completely counterintuitive for most people.
It totally is. What if we've been, training for the wrong sport entirely? We spend hours memorizing stats and practicing in front of the mirror, but the ultimate shortcut to closing a deal or, frankly, just getting someone on your side in any professional setting is actually extracting a story from the buyer.
That's the real skill right there.
So, today in this deep dive, you are about to learn how to completely flip the traditional sales script to make the buyer the narrator.
And this matters so much.
It really does. It fundamentally matters for anyone in business or entrepreneurship or management because understanding your prospect's narrative is the absolute only way to know which of your own stories will actually close the deal.
Yeah, and doing that, it requires a complete rewiring of our professional instincts.
How so? What do you mean by rewiring?
Well, think about it. We enter a high-stakes room,
Yeah.
and our fight or flight response just kicks in immediately.
Oh, for sure. Sweaty palms and everything.
Right. And for most professionals, that fight instinct translates directly into talking.
Yeah.
We think, if I'm speaking, I'm controlling the room.
I'm showing how smart I am.
Exactly. I'm demonstrating value. I'm justifying why I'm even sitting here.
Yeah.
But that active performance, it's actually a form of defensive shielding.
Wait, really? Defensive?
Yeah, completely defensive. The moment you start treating persuasion as a monologue, you are building a massive wall between yourself and the person across the table.
Okay, that makes sense. Let me bring in a scenario that I think perfectly illustrates why that wall goes up so incredibly fast.
Go for it.
So, I want you to imagine walking into a doctor's office. You're feeling terrible. Your stomach is just an absolute knot.
Sounds awful.
It is. You've got this sharp, persistent pain that has literally kept you up for 3 days. So you sit on that crinkly paper on the exam table.
Oh, I hate that paper.
Right. And before you can even open your mouth to explain where it hurts, the doctor just strides in and spends 45 minutes bragging.
Bragging.
Yeah, bragging. They are showing you their framed medical degree from Harvard. They're detailing their state-of-the-art diagnostic machines down the hall.
Oh, boy.
They're literally monologuing about their incredible bedside manner and listing all these regional awards they won last year.
That sounds like a nightmare.
And then, without asking you a single diagnostic question, they just hand you a random prescription and say, take this, it works for everyone.
Well, that literally constitutes medical malpractice.
Right. You've run out of there.
Any rational human being would bolt out of that waiting room.
Yeah.
You definitely wouldn't take the pills, and you certainly wouldn't pay the bill.
Not a chance.
Because, the fundamental breach of trust there isn't that the doctor is unqualified. It's
Yeah.
that they assumed the solution without even investigating the pathology.
Exactly. Yet we see this exact same malpractice in corporate boardrooms literally every single day.
Oh, constantly.
A vendor walks into an office and immediately launches into like a 30-slide deck about their company's glorious history.
Their massive footprint in Europe.
Yes, their footprint in Europe, their new software update, all of it. It is the exact same arrogant prescription. So if we demand a diagnosis in medicine before we swallow a pill, why on earth do salespeople assume a buyer will swallow a pitch without a diagnosis?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what a symptom actually looks like in the business world.
What do you mean?
Well, in medicine, diagnosing requires, palpating the abdomen or running blood work. But in business, the symptoms are embedded entirely within the buyer's story.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
So, treating every initial encounter like a medical diagnosis, it forces a total shift in your physical and psychological posture. Your job isn't to prescribe immediately.
Right, you have to hold back.
Exactly. Your job is to extract the symptoms before you ever even unzip your medical bag. If you do not hear their story first, you are flying completely blind.
Just guessing, essentially.
Completely guessing.
Yeah.
Think about the structural risk you take by pitching first. Say you deliver this flawlessly polished presentation about cost-saving efficiencies.
Okay.
But the buyer's actual pain point, like the existential threat keeping them awake at 3 a.m., is supply chain reliability. Your perfect pitch just became a massive demonstration of your own ignorance.
Ouch. Yeah, that would backfire horribly.
You haven't just failed to sell them, you have actively proved that you do not understand their world.
I see the logic there, totally. But let me challenge this from the perspective of the person actually sitting in that room.
Sure, bring it on.
Think about the last time you sat in a vendor meeting as a listener, or think about the people you are actually trying to sell to. Buyers are incredibly overwhelmingly busy.
True. Extremely busy.
You have these procurement managers stacking back-to-back 30-minute blocks for 10 hours a day. Don't they expect you to pitch them quickly so they can get back to their inbox?
That is always the fear.
Because I feel like if I walk into a high-pressure corporate environment and try to initiate, a cozy fireside chat to diagnose them, they are going to look at their watch, cross their arms, and say, please, just get to the point. What are you selling?
Yeah, that is honestly the most common anxiety professionals have when adopting this approach. And to understand why it's actually not the case, we have to look at the neuroscience of how the brain processes information during a meeting.
Okay, neuroscience. Let's get into it.
When you pitch right out of the gate, the buyer's brain acts remarkably like an aggressive email spam filter.
A spam filter?
Yeah, they're sitting there with their guard completely up, scanning your words for keywords that signal a sales threat.
Oh, wow. So they're literally looking for a reason to block you.
Precisely. Their prefrontal cortex is doing heavy analytical lifting. They have to evaluate every single claim you make.
Comparing it against their budget, I bet.
Comparing it to the budget, looking for logical fallacies, searching for the hidden catch. That cognitive load is exhausting.
It really is. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Right. So by rushing to the pitch, you aren't respecting their time. You are actively taxing their executive function.
Man, so the pitch itself is actually what makes them defensive. You are just throwing data at a firewall. But then, how does asking for a story bypass that spam filter?
Because you aren't sending data anymore. You're asking for a download.
Ah, I like that.
When you invite someone to share their own experience, the neurochemistry in the room completely shifts. The brain's reward centers actually release dopamine when we talk about ourselves and our own challenges.
We do love talking about ourselves.
You really do. And the cognitive load drops dramatically. Recalling a personal experience requires far less analytical energy than evaluating a stranger's complex proposition.
Right, because I already know what happened to me. I don't have to figure it out.
Exactly. They relax. The spam filter just gets turned off.
Mm-hmm.
And from a pure efficiency standpoint, it actually prevents a catastrophic waste of time.
Because you're not pitching the wrong thing.
Right. Spending 20 minutes pitching a mismatched solution burns both parties. But if you let them speak for 5 minutes, revealing the exact narrative of their need, you can tailor your response in 2 minutes.
Wow, so you just saved 13 minutes of useless friction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's actually a time saver.
That reframing is incredibly liberating. It really means the pressure to perform is entirely off your shoulders.
It's totally gone.
You don't have to be the fast-talking, charismatic closer from like some 1980s Wall Street movie. You just have to be a really meticulous diagnostician.
That's all it is.
But I feel like that leads us to a bit of a dangerous trap. Because we aren't just looking for random small talk to pass the time, right?
No, definitely not.
If I let the buyer talk for 20 minutes about their weekend golf trip,
Right.
I haven't diagnosed anything. I just wasted the entire meeting. We have to be hunting for highly specific diagnostic data.
You are hunting for three very distinct categories of narrative. Think of them as the three pillars of a successful diagnosis.
The 3 pillars. Got it.
Right. If you can extract these three specific stories, you basically hold the architectural blueprint of the buyer's mind.
Okay, let's unpack that first pillar. Personal stories.
Essential.
The idea here is to build genuine rapport, getting to know them as a human being so you can move out of the stranger category and into the trusted advisor category.
Exactly right.
But I struggle with this one, I have to be honest. Frankly, if I am a buyer and a vendor sits down and suddenly asks me about my childhood or my deep personal life, I'm going to feel super manipulated.
Oh, yeah, that's way too much.
Right. It feels like forced intimacy. So how do you cross that line without sounding like a creep playing some psychological trick?
It is a really critical distinction, and you're entirely right to be wary of forced intimacy. A personal story in a business context absolutely does not mean extracting their deepest traumas.
No childhood trauma today, please.
Right, no therapy sessions. It simply means understanding their professional origin story and the human motivations that are driving their career right now.
Okay, so more like, how did you get here?
Exactly. You are looking for the narrative of how they arrived in this specific chair, facing this specific problem. People just do not make purely rational mathematical decisions in business.
We'd like to think we do, but we don't.
We don't. They make decisions based on risk aversion, ego, ambition, and the desire for peer validation.
That makes a lot of sense.
So getting a personal story maybe about a mentor who shaped their leadership style, or a spectacular failure early in their career that made them just obsessed with quality control that gives you the emotional context.
It gives you their decision-making matrix.
Precisely. All things being equal in a spreadsheet, a buyer will always award the contract to the person they feel truly sees them.
Building that personal rapport is vital, for sure. But getting someone to like you doesn't necessarily open their wallet.
No, does
To
it?
do that, you have to find out what is actually causing them pain. So you need the second pillar, the biggest problem narrative.
The most crucial one for the sale.
And we have to make a very sharp distinction here between a stated need and a problem story, because they sound really similar, but they operate completely differently.
Oh, completely differently.
If a prospect says, I need a better warehouse network, that is a stated need. It is a sterile, logical statement.
It's totally sterile because it completely lacks emotional and logistical leverage. A stated need is basically the title of the book. A problem story is the actual plot.
Right, the title versus the plot.
Let's look at the anatomical difference. The stated need is just, we need more efficiency in our logistics.
Boring.
Right. But a biggest problem story sounds like this. Let me tell you about the absolute nightmare we had last month. A crucial shipment went out 3 days late because our current system couldn't locate a specific pallet in the warehouse.
Oh man, you can feel the stress already.
So we had to halt our regular operations, run a custom production schedule overnight, and pay exorbitant express shipping bills just to prevent the client from firing us.
That is rough.
And the worst part, a week later, we found the original pallet sitting in the completely wrong aisle.
The texture of that story is just a goldmine. You aren't just selling a generic concept of efficiency anymore.
You're selling relief.
Right. You now understand the specific villain of their story. The villain is the lost pallet, the panicked overnight production, and the total humiliation of that massive express shipping bill.
Exactly. You know the exact pain points.
So when it comes time to prescribe your solution, you aren't just listing features. You are selling them the peace of mind that comes with knowing the exact GPS coordinates of every piece of inventory.
So they never have to explain a catastrophic shipping bill to their CEO ever again.
You've identified what failure looks and feels like to them on a deeply visceral level.
You understand the stakes. And when you understand the stakes, your solution basically ceases to be a commodity. It becomes the weapon they use to slay their specific dragon.
Slay the dragon. I love that. And that brings us to the third pillar, which might honestly be my favorite concept in this entire strategy, the favorite supplier story.
It's so powerful.
Normally, vendors sit down and they just ask, what are your vendor requirements? Or what are you looking for in a partner?
Which always gets a terrible answer.
Always. It results in this boring, bulleted list of platitudes. We want someone reliable, customer-focused, and cost-effective. Like, it means absolutely nothing.
Everyone says that.
Right. Instead, you ask them to tell you a story about the best partner they've ever worked with. And there's this brilliant historical example of this involving Microsoft back during the 2010 Iceland volcano eruption.
Oh, that event was an unprecedented logistical catastrophe for global business.
It really was.
European airspace was completely shut down by the ash cloud for days. Nobody could move.
Absolute chaos. Microsoft had executives and personnel stranded all over the globe, unable to get home, missing critical meetings, literally sleeping in airports.
I remember seeing the pictures. It was wild.
And the procurement manager at Microsoft at the time, this man named John Stevens, he often tells the story of their travel partner during that specific crisis.
It's such a great case study.
When the ash cloud hit, this travel agency didn't send an email pointing to, like, a force majeure clause in their contract. They put all hands on deck.
They stepped up.
They really did. Their agents worked 48 hours straight, no sleep. They were constantly rerouting flights, calling hotels, finding train tickets, doing whatever it took to get Microsoft's people home safely.
Which is amazing service, but that's not even the best part.
Right. The detail that elevates this from a good customer service anecdote to the Holy Grail story is what they didn't do.
Yes.
During those 48 hours of relentless labor, the travel partner never once mentioned their fees, their overtime, or their service charges. They simply said, we will figure all the billing out later. Let's get your people home first.
The strategic value of that story is just immense, and we really have to examine how John Stevens utilized it afterward.
Yeah, how did he use it?
Well, he didn't just tell that story to other travel agencies. He told it to existing suppliers and potential vendors across completely unrelated sectors.
Unrelated sectors? Like what?
Like software providers, hardware manufacturers, consultants, everyone.
But why do that, though? If I'm pitching a SaaS product to Microsoft, why on earth do I need to hear a war story about a travel agency from a volcano eruption? How does that help me sell software?
Because he is handing you the cipher to decode their entire corporate culture.
Oh, I see.
He is handing you his exact, uncompromising blueprint for what excellence means to his organization. By telling that story, he is essentially saying, this is the definition of a true partnership at Microsoft.
It means prioritizing the people over the immediate transactional billing.
Exactly. Prioritizing safety and success during a crisis. You simply cannot capture that deeply ingrained cultural value in a standard vendor questionnaire.
No, a checkbox won't tell you that.
Right. So when a buyer shares a favorite supplier's story with you, you are no longer guessing what they value. You are literally being given the answer key to the final exam.
You know exactly what behavioral traits you need to demonstrate to win their absolute loyalty.
Exactly.
It is a profound listening framework. You walk into that discovery meeting and your entire agenda is to mentally check off those 3 boxes. Have I uncovered the human being behind the title?
Yes.
Have I uncovered the agonizing plot of their biggest problem?
Got it.
And have I uncovered their gold standard for what a heroic partner looks like? If you leave the room without those 3 narratives, you have no business opening your pitch deck. You just aren't ready.
You're definitely not ready. Which brings us to the operational hurdle, right?
Right.
Because knowing which stories to hunt for is only half the battle. The far more difficult challenge is the actual execution. How do you actually get a guarded, hyper-busy, skeptical professional to lower their armor and open up?
You certainly can't just slide a coffee across the table and demand, tell me the story of your biggest professional failure.
That would be so weird.
Right. It requires utilizing a tactic that most ambitious, driven professionals find absolutely terrifying. It requires mastering the power of the void.
Silence. It is arguably the most potent yet aggressively avoided tool in human communication.
We abhor silence. Nature abhors a vacuum, and human beings abhor dead air in a conversation.
It's so uncomfortable.
Think about the physical sensation of silence in a high-stakes meeting.
Yeah.
The moment there is a pause, our anxiety just spikes. Our heart rate literally goes up.
You start sweating a little bit.
Yes. We feel this overwhelming, almost magnetic urge to fill the void, usually by rambling about some tangential product feature or nervously clarifying a point that honestly didn't need clarifying in the first place.
We really have to look at the evolutionary psychology behind that dread. For early humans, Silence in a social setting was often an indicator of tribal disapproval or even impending danger.
Like a predator is nearby.
Exactly. We are wired to seek continuous verbal affirmation that we belong and that we are safe. In a modern corporate setting, that translates into the fear of looking incompetent.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
We deeply believe that if we aren't talking, we aren't adding value. But if your objective is to extract a narrative, your own voice is actually the single biggest obstacle in the room.
I often think of a bad discovery meeting like a poorly designed conversation funnel. When you are pitching relentlessly, tossing out data point after data point, the buyer is mentally exhausted just trying to process the influx.
They can't even think.
Right. And when they finally do get a chance to speak, they only offer short, highly defensive statements. Yes, our budget is finalized. No, we aren't looking to switch platforms this quarter.
Just trying to get you to stop talking.
Exactly. They give you the absolute minimum amount of information required to fulfill the social contract of the conversation and get you out of their office.
But when you ask a question and then force yourself to just stop talking, the social pressure completely shifts. The gravitational pull of the conversation actually forces them to step into the void.
The power dynamics of silence are fascinating. We mistakenly view dead air as a failure of rapport, but strategically applied silence is an assertion of immense confidence.
It really is. The recommendation is to literally count to 5 in your head after asking a profound question.
5 seconds.
5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
In the middle of a business meeting, 5 seconds feels glacial. It feels like an absolute eternity.
It feels like an hour. But you must not step on the buyer's silence, because during those 5 seconds, they are not ignoring you.
They aren't.
No, they are processing. They are rewinding their memory. They are formulating a complex thought.
Man, I can vividly imagine the internal panic of the novice salesperson during those 5 seconds. The buyer looks away, deep in thought, and the salesperson's internal monologue is just screaming, "Oh no, they hated that question. I offended them. I need to fix this."
Panic mode activated.
Exactly. And so they jump in, or, I could explain it another way, or we could just move on to the pricing. Boom, the story is dead.
Completely dead.
You just rescued them from the very silence that was about to produce the gold.
You assassinated the narrative just as it was being born.
Hmm.
And, beyond just letting this story materialize, there's a massive secondary benefit to enduring that void.
What's that?
Because the modern business world is so terrified of silence. The professional who can sit comfortably in the quiet instantly projects an aura of immense authority.
Oh, I see.
You stop looking like a desperate vendor begging for validation, and you start looking like a senior consultant. Think about it. A surgeon doesn't nervously chatter while reading an MRI.
No, they just stare at it in silence.
They look at the film in total silence. Mastering the pause signals to the buyer that you are secure, trustworthy, and deeply serious about the diagnosis.
Silence is confidence. I love that framework. But obviously, you cannot just walk into a room and sit in mute silence until they confess their problems to you.
That would definitely get you escorted out by security.
Right. You have to speak eventually to set up the void. You have to ask the right questions. And as we established earlier, asking, "Tell me a story," is a catastrophic strategy.
It guarantees a blank stare.
Why is that?
Well, the cognitive reality is that human beings do not categorize their lived experiences as stories in real time.
We just don't think like that.
We don't.
Mhm.
If you ask a seasoned executive, tell me a story about your career, their brain freezes. They don't view themselves as characters in a novel. They view their lives as a chaotic sequence of Tuesday morning staff meetings, budget approvals, and endless email chains.
Right. They don't have a folder in their brain labeled interesting anecdotes for vendors.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how a computer hard drive functions. If you go into your computer's search bar and type in the file type story, you will get 0 results. The operating system just doesn't know what that means.
It's the wrong query.
But if you search by a specific date or a specific keyword like Q3 system crash, the system instantly pulls up the exact file you are looking for. You have to provide the correct search parameters for their memory.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the difference between semantic memory and episodic memory.
Semantic versus episodic. Can you break that down?
Sure, semantic memory is facts, figures, and abstract concepts. Episodic memory is tied to specific times, places, and emotions.
Okay.
You have to engineer your prompts to bypass the semantic and trigger the episodic. Instead of asking for an abstract evaluation, you anchor your question to a specific event in time.
There is a brilliant example of this mechanic in action involving a company called Tailwind Marketing. They sell high-speed internet services.
Oh, this is a great one.
Imagine a door-to-door sales rep for this company. If they knock on a door and ask the homeowner, "Do you like your current internet service?" What is the neurological response?
Well, the homeowner accesses their semantic memory. They perform a quick, abstract evaluation and deliver a binary response, yes or no.
And the conversation just dies there.
The loop is immediately closed. You have learned absolutely nothing about their pain points, their lifestyle, or their friction with the current provider.
Exactly. The question was way too broad. But if you deploy an engineered temporal prompt, what we might call a problem prompt, the dynamic changes instantly.
What's the prompt?
Instead of, "Do you like your service?" the rep asks, "Have you ever noticed your internet slows down right after dinner?"
See, the difference in the cognitive response there is monumental. That question acts as a highly specific temporal trigger.
Right after dinner.
Exactly. It pulls the homeowner out of the abstract present and drops them directly into a specific frustrating memory from their past.
Suddenly, the homeowner ceases to be a defensive consumer and transforms into a frustrated narrator. They instantly launch into a story.
What do they say?
They say something like, "Oh man, yes, just last Monday I had my buddies over to stream the football game. Right in the middle of the fourth quarter, the buffering got so bad the screen completely froze.
Worse.
We messed with the router for 20 minutes and eventually had to walk down the street to my neighbor's house to finish the game. It was humiliating."
Analyze what that single engineered prompt just extracted.
Yeah.
You didn't just find out they have slow internet.
Yeah.
You found the villain.
The buffering icon during the fourth quarter?
Exactly. And you found the emotional stakes, the humiliation of looking like a bad host in front of his friends.
So powerful.
You have everything you need to position your high-speed internet not just as a fiber optic cable with more bandwidth, but as the absolute guarantor of his social standing for the next football party.
You found the file on the hard drive. So, as a practical application for you listening to this, audit the discovery questions you habitually use.
Yes, definitely do this.
Look at your standard meeting agenda. If your questions can be answered with a simple yes, no, or a one-word metric, they are actively hurting you. Throw them out.
They're useless.
Replace them with temporal, day-in-the-life questions. Walk me through exactly what happened the morning you realized your legacy software had been compromised.
Or, take me back to a typical Tuesday before you hired your current agency.
You are forcing their brain to recount a chronology, and a chronology naturally and inevitably blossoms into a story.
Walk me through what happened is honestly one of the most powerful phrases in business communication because it is an explicit invitation to take a journey together.
It really is. But even with the right prompts and the mastery of silence, there are still environmental and psychological barriers that can suppress the narrative, right?
Absolutely. The environment plays a huge role.
This brings us to the final set of tools for extraction, which rely on the physical environment you are in and the evolutionary principle of reciprocity. Let's look at the physical environment first.
Okay.
Consider the architecture of a standard corporate office. When buyers are sitting behind their heavy oak desks, surrounded by their filing cabinets, under those terrible fluorescent lights they have their game face on.
An office is designed to be a fortress of productivity and defense. When they are in that space, their brain is dominated by immediate threats.
Like what kind of threats?
The next meeting on their calendar, their quarterly KPIs, the unread emails piling up on their second monitor. The physical environment dictates their psychological state, and that state is inherently guarded.
So they aren't going to open up in there.
Probably not. If you want them to drop the corporate armor and share a genuine narrative, you frequently have to alter the physical geography of the encounter.
You have to get them out of the box. Take them on a site visit to one of your facilities. Take them to a long lunch at a quiet restaurant.
Invite them to walk the floor at an industry conference.
The moment they step out of their designated fortress, the psychological armor just begins to crack. They have the mental breathing room to actually reflect, look back at their career, and share.
However, we must acknowledge that leaving the office isn't always feasible.
That's true. Sometimes you are just stuck there.
If you are locked into a conference room or their personal office, you have to use the environment itself as a conversational lever.
How do you do that?
Consider the modern reality of corporate real estate. Desk space is shrinking. Offices are getting smaller. Because physical real estate is at such a premium, professionals only dedicate space to items of high personal significance.
Ah, the artifacts. If you look around a buyer's office, you will see the standard corporate-issued items, but then you will see the
The
anomalies.
things that stand out.
A framed diploma, a faded ribbon from a marathon, or my personal favorite, the weird, inexplicable paperweight sitting next to the monitor. Nobody keeps a weird paperweight just for aesthetic pleasure. There's always a narrative attached to it.
Always. Pointing to that object and asking, I have to ask, what is the story behind that paperweight? Is an incredibly low-stakes, non-threatening way to get the buyer talking.
It's a great icebreaker.
It is. You are warming up the engine. You are getting them accustomed to the rhythm of telling you a story in a safe context before you transition into asking about their professional pain points.
It breaks the ice with genuine curiosity rather than forced small talk. And that leads to the final and perhaps most deeply ingrained psychological hack: reciprocity.
This one is huge.
If you want a guarded buyer to tell you a vulnerable story about a business problem, you cannot simply sit there like a grand inquisitor and demand it.
No, you have to give something to get something.
You have to be willing to bleed a little bit first. You have to use the tell your story first tactic.
This taps into the most primitive mechanics of human social interaction. If you want someone to share a background story about a professional failure or a strategic misstep, you must offer a brief, authentic story of your own struggles first.
It is using your own vulnerability as social currency. If I sit down and tell you a quick self-deprecating story about the time I completely bombed a massive presentation early in my career because my laptop died and I forgot my notes, it triggers an automatic response in your brain.
The mirror neurons just fire up immediately.
Right. You immediately think, oh man, something exactly like that happened to me in Chicago 5 years ago, and you feel a compelling urge to share it to match my vulnerability.
We can view this through the lens of evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
For early hominids on the savannah, encountering a stranger was literally a life or death proposition.
The tension was absolute.
The quickest way to de-escalate that tension was to extend an open, empty hand to visibly demonstrate that you were not holding a weapon.
Wow, I love that imagery.
Sharing a personal story of failure or struggle in a corporate boardroom is the modern conversational equivalent of extending an open hand.
Showing you have no weapons.
It proves you aren't a flawless, predatory salesperson looking to exploit their weaknesses. It signals that you are human, fallible, and safe.
It gives them the psychological permission to lower their own weapons and speak truthfully about where their company is failing. Extending an open hand. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. You are communicating, I'm human, you're human, let's figure this out together.
Exactly.
And the very moment they reciprocate, the moment they lean forward and tell their own story of struggle, the entire dynamic of the room is permanently altered. You are no longer a vendor trying to extract capital from a target.
You're on the same team now.
You are two professionals sitting on the same side of the table looking at a shared problem.
And that transformation synthesizes everything we have explored today. The absolute soul of effective persuasion, whether you are selling software, pitching a startup, or even trying to get your boss to approve a new project, is realizing that persuasion is not a monologue.
It's a deeply collaborative storytelling exercise.
And the most critical rule of that collaboration is that the buyer must be the first author. The person who tightly grips the microphone first usually loses the deal because they are prescribing without diagnosing.
They are guessing at the pathology.
By enforcing the discipline to diagnose first, by meticulously hunting for those three foundational narratives, the personal origin, the biggest logistical or emotional problem, and the gold standard favored supplier, you are mapping the complex emotional and operational terrain of the buyer before you ever take a step into the pitch.
And you achieve that mapping by mastering the terrifying power of the void. You endure the silence.
You count to 5.
You count to 5 while your heart races. You deploy those brilliantly engineered temporal pumps that search their mental hard drive for the exact narrative you need.
And you show your open hands.
You use the physical environment and your own calculated vulnerability to show those open hands. When you execute those tactics, you shed the skin of the annoying vendor pushing a commodity. You transform into a trusted confidant.
You become the rare, exceptional doctor that patients actually want to listen to, entirely because you took the time to figure out exactly where it hurts before you ever reached for the prescription pad.
You don't need to force a clean, binary diagnosis on a messy, complex business reality. You just need to create the space for them to tell you the story of how they broke their arm in the first place.
Well said.
Now that you've mastered the psychology of extracting the buyer's story, the stage is perfectly set for you to finally speak. But exactly what kind of story should you tell in return to build an unbreakable bond of rapport and actually close the deal?
That's the next big question.
That is a deep dive for next time.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.